All right, guys, it's Herp House Rock. We're back again with Frank Payne from Living Art by Frank Payne. And I don't know if Dave's going to hop on a little later, but maybe you will. And we're going to get this show rolling.
All right. All right. So, Frank, the same question we ask pretty much everybody. We want to know the down and dirty. When did you start getting into reptiles? What caused you to go in the direction you're in? How long have you been doing it? Where have you gone? Like different species? Tell us the whole story.
All right. So I'll stop talking like 2 hours from now. So, I mean, I've just, like everybody, like everyone that's been on here and everybody that's into reptiles, I've been into it since I was a little kid, obsessed with dinosaurs, then obsessed with reptiles. I was born in Houston, Texas. My dad lives there. I spent every summer and every winter vacation down in Houston in the suburbs. So I spent every summer long catching lizards, catching snakes, brought my first rattlesnake home when I was 8. Got in quite a bit of trouble for that. I still don't think my mom knows about that one. But just chasing stuff around all over and just always obsessed. I, kept the Knolls there. My dad and at the time, then like my mom also later was really supportive of my animals. So we always got stuff. I always had stuff from a young age. Carpet chameleons was one of my very first things when I was a little kid, like anoles and house geckos. My first like real pet that I like researched on my own and spent a lot of time preparing for was a northern blue-tongued skink that I got when I was 12. And I had that guy for 23 years before he eventually died. So, and he was an adult when I got him. So I've been keeping 37 now. So I've been keeping northerns for 25 years now, exactly, continuously. I've always had a handful.
Wow.
Yeah. And I started breeding northerns in high school, over 20 years ago. And just like I had like 2 pairs in high school, but they bred pretty well. But like, I tell you what, back in the late 90s, I couldn't sell them. I'd go to Hamburg and I'd have my own little table. And this is when it was easy to get a table at Hamburg and half of it was empty. And I'd have half-grown, 1/3 grown northern blue-tongued skinks on my table for $150, and I couldn't sell the darn things.
Wow.
I wholesaled multiple litters to Linda Switzer in the late 90s and early 2000s because I just couldn't sell them at shows. So I was like, well, the heck with it. So I was wholesaling northerns to her for $75 a piece in high school and college. And so then like I stopped breeding them. I loved them. I always kept them. I always had a couple on me. And I stopped breeding them, and maybe 3, 4, or 5 years later, then blue tongues exploded, and I was like, oh shit, I guess I better start actually breeding them again. So I've been getting back into it more. I've always had lizards since I was a young kid. I knew it's always been my obsession. Just been absolutely obsessed with reptiles for always, as long as I can remember. I knew I wanted to go to school for something animal related, but I didn't know what. So when I went to college, I went for a biology degree because I figured I could kind of do a little bit of anything with that. While I was in college, I started working for a local zoo. It was actually pretty amazing zoo for reptiles up in northern Pennsylvania called Clyde Peeling's Reptiland, which sounds like a little roadside attraction. And it was 50 years ago when Clyde opened it, but now it's a major AZA institution. It's been AZA for decades now.
Wow.
And it's it's one of the top 5 largest herp collections in the United States in the AZA. Clyde and his son Chad, they're just always one of the top guys in the AZA when it comes to herps. And so anyway, I started working summers when I was in college for them, and then right out of college, they're like, please don't apply anywhere else. Just come work for us. So I started working for them full time for a number of years, and eventually decided I couldn't survive long term on a zookeeper salary. So I went back to get my master's degree in education, and did that while working the zoo job. Did my master's at night. and then eventually became a teacher. And so now I've been a teacher for 14 years now, a biology teacher. And I worked for the zoo even for years after that. I worked every summer break for the zoo, every winter break. Would still come in and help out as much as I could on weekends, even sometimes. So I've been keeping reptiles and amphibians literally for over 25 years. And it's just now, maybe the past 5 years or so, it's starting to increase. Trying to, view it a little bit more as a business and just trying to look at it from that point of view, which is one of the reasons why I really like the show that you guys do, because it comes at it from that point of view. And for lizard guys especially, it's kind of like a stigma, like talking about it as a business. Mm-hmm. And I never really understood that. And so like I like hearing you guys talking, and a lot of it's snake stuff, which I don't know a whole heck of a lot about. But you have a lot of great lizard guys on, and even just your perspective coming at it is from it's very passionate, but it is from a business point of view where you have to think about those sort of things. So like I just, as a husband and a father, and I was like, I can't afford to have a basement full of reptiles, and unless there makes some sort of sense out of it. Like I can't devote this much time and effort and money on a teacher's salary, and not have it help out. So I do my best these days, and to maintain my passion to work with species that I truly care about, while at the same time making sure I'm not just blowing money, and making sure I'm working with stuff that people want and that people want to buy for more than $20. So I do my best to try and kind of trod that middle line.
It's definitely a balance, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're really good at spending money, Ryan and I. We really are.
We got the blowing money down pat. We figured that part out.
Every reptile guy is, man. Like it's like you can't help it. There's so many goodies, so many things.
It's nonstop. We're like, that's it. We bought nothing else for the year, and then somebody like, hey man, well, what do you think about this? And they're like, I'm never gonna get this offer again. Like this is probably once in a lifetime thing. Like I got to do it.
Right.
Well, just like with the smog, that I'm sure we'll talk more about later. And I worked with the sun gazers, smog giganteus, and I worked with the Borneo earless monitors.
Nice.
Like after a while, like once your name is out there and people realize like, oh, relatively what you're doing, how to take care of lizards, then you get messages, you get phone calls. And when somebody calls you and says, I have a Borneo earless monitor for half the normal price, I'm like, shit, okay.
Yeah.
Like, or like if somebody calls me like, oh, I have 4 sun gazers at a ridiculously good price, like, all right, like I'm not ready for that, but like, but then like that's the kind of crap that's kind of veered me away from the path, and I've gotten a lot better over the past year. I've been expanding, and now it's finally like, okay, it's time to take it easy a little bit and just focus on these projects that I have developed and invested in, and just kind of try and, at least for a year, try to settle down a little bit. We'll see how it works out. You know how it goes.
You gotta let those projects bear fruit, and then you can reinvest a percentage.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or you justify it by like what we tell people. What I've been telling people lately. I'm like, man, I really want this really crazy animal, but I don't have it. It's not a project. It's just something I want. I'm like, buy a camera, make it its own, YouTube channel, and just let it live stream forever. And then it's like, maybe it'll make money on its own,
That's funny. That's a good idea.
That's right. You guys heard it here first. Just put a live stream on anything you got. Excuse me.
WatchMyCat.com.
Yeah.
All right. So, obviously been working with a lot of stuff. Dave is going to be hopping on in a little bit. He's running a little bit behind. So we'll talk blue tongues in a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to dig into that.
Yep.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about chameleons first?
Yeah.
What are your big passions, right? Chameleons are one of those animals that I don't care who you are. You can look at a beautiful panther chameleon or some, one of the rare chameleons even, And you just like get captivated because they're just so colorful and they can be just awesome. So how did you get into that, and what is your favorite, species of chameleon? What are you working with? What are you shooting for?
Sure. So chameleons have always been my number one passion. They've always been my number one thing. Where the first time I saw one on the cover of a reptile book when I was, however old I was, 10 years old, whatever. The first time I saw a color photo one, I was just blown away. And I've been obsessed with chameleons ever since, so I've been keeping chameleons, nonstop again for 25 plus years. I've worked with pretty much everything I can get my hands on, just like a couple here and there. And over a long period of time, developed a pretty decent understanding of what they need and, what their requirements are and, what they're finicky about, what they're sensitive about. So I worked with it. Yeah, there's a carpet chameleon. I'm working with just 2 species of chameleon now. I've really focused, and those are some banana pectinata.
I like pectinata.
Oh, they're awesome. But yeah, so right now I'm just working with carpet chameleons, Furcifer lateralis, and lesser chameleons, Furcifer minor. They're 2 of the smaller species. Like we're talking, their bodies are like 3 to 6 inches long, but they're some of the most beautiful, the most colorful ones. There's a real nice female carpet chameleon, and that's full grown. That's an adult size, which is amazing because unlike a panther chameleon, which is like 4 or 5 times that size, these things stay small, and it's much easier to keep them. Like a panther chameleon or a veiled chameleon, you need a huge cage for those things. Like we're talking minimum 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 foot. And, quite frankly, for a breeder, that's not the most economical thing in the world. And even for like a keeper, that's not terribly easy to do. But something that size right there, that's really manageable. That does not need a large enclosure. We're talking 18 inches cubed is a nice size enclosure for an animal like that. And also, panther chameleons, they're bred by dozens, if not hundreds of people. There's tons and tons of them out there. It's quite honestly, the market's pretty flooded with them. And with the size and with that, I just decided I'm not going to do that, even though it is the most like common pet chameleon. And they are gorgeous. They're amazing animals. So I decided to focus on 2 smaller, equally as colorful, equally as hardy, but less common, more sought after. And I knew that I could take care of them. I could breed them. So that's what I decided to focus on. So over the past 5 years or so, I've been producing a couple hundred of those a year. So it's pretty solid at this point. This year, I've been dipping right around, a little bit above, a little bit below 200 a year.
Nice.
And this year, hopefully, with both species like combined, hopefully I can double that. They're very prolific animals, and it's just a matter of, do you have the space, do you have the time? So like once you know how to take care of them, once you know how to breed them, they're really not that hard if you're familiar with chameleon keeping and lizard keeping. So that's really taken off. I absolutely love those 2 species. They're just awesome. You saw like pictures of them, and that's like, and honestly, those are average ones. Those are nice, the ones that you showed, but they're average. There's ones that are like super bright. Chameleons are just awesome. They move, the way that they look, the way that they catch their food. There's a minor chameleon. Just like they're just stunning, gorgeous little animals. And again, the fact that it's this big, that it fits on your fingertips, and it doesn't require a very large enclosure, and that an animal like that could give me 50, 60 eggs in a year.
Oh wow.
Where if it's good, if it's really doing exactly well the way it should, they're very prolific animals if they're treated correctly. And they're not going to live 20, 30 years like a ball python or like a blue tongue. They might only live 3, 4 years, but again, they're a live fast, die young type of animal. That's the way chameleons are in general. They're only living 3, 4 years, maybe a little bit more if you're lucky. But again, they're cranking out 50 or more eggs a year. That's their reproductive strategy. And honestly, it's nice. I like the turnover. I like raising them up, being adults in 6, 8 months. And the only issue then in a lay clutch of eggs takes a month. A couple weeks later, you breed again, and every 2 months they're laying a clutch of 12, 15 eggs. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Now, the only thing is their incubation time is at minimum 6 months and quite often 7 to 9 months as an incubation time.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's like Parsons chameleons, which are the really big guys, 18 months at a minimum for incubation. Man. It's like one of the longest, if not the very longest, like vertebrate incubation that's known. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's up there anyway. It's a long time. Sometimes over 24 months. The eggs are in incubation so long. Even the carpet and the minor chameleons, they require a diapause, like basically a hibernation period, where you pull them down to trigger development. And so what's awesome, I've been doing diapause experiments, is you can manipulate when these animals are going to hatch. I could leave them in the mini fridge for months until I want them to develop and pull them out. Or I could leave them in the mini fridge for only 30 days and then pull them out, and then 4 months later they're going to hatch. So what I'm playing around with now, from like my own sanity point of view and from like a business point of view, is to stagger my hatchings so that I have babies all year round. I have a steady flow of babies hatching all year round, which obviously you're not doing with blue-tongued skinks. You're not doing with ball pythons.
Yeah.
So by being able to manipulate incubation like that, I've had eggs incubate for 14 months. Playing around with it. It's awesome. You can kind of just throw them in not the fridge, but 50 degrees, 60 degrees, and throw them in there for a while and forget about them. And then bring them out when you want them to develop, and 4 months later you have baby chameleons.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Can you go through a quick 101, maybe not quick, but 101 on how to keep chameleons? I mean, because part of what we do on this is, explain the 101 type of stuff, what to eat, what conditions, the whole deal. That'd be great.
Yeah, and I love that stuff. Like I was listening to, Ron St. Pierre on your guys, and I was like, man, I was just blown away by that one, man. Like, I don't know how I didn't know more about that guy sooner, but man, that blew me away. That just blew me away.
I think about nesting. That's all I think about is nesting now. Ever since we talked with him. So
he's something else. I'm working with. I was one of the first people to buy babies of those blue beauty anoles that Randy was breeding. I bought 4 of them. Very lucky, ended up with 2.2. And now Ron is like the Anolis master, so I'm watching this podcast, like writing stuff down. I'm like I need to get this guy on the phone because he's the master with these things, and I'm I can keep them, but I haven't bred them yet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, so I love that part, so I'm happy to share. And I put I do my best to put care information out there on my website. I have articles on everything that I breed. I put up there. I've been published in Reptiles magazine a few times for my lizards, my chameleons.
I see you just got into the YouTube too, right?
Yeah. I just started YouTube, started doing that a little bit. I don't have the time hardly to do it as much as I would like, but right now I'm not doing like the whole YouTube thing where I'm doing like frequent videos. Right now I'm just trying to get good care information out there. Because like, I don't know how it is for snakes, but like for lizards, like if you search in like care of chameleons, like it's 99% just bad out there. It's just bad. And so like I'm trying to get just decent in it. Like I don't know everything. I don't know that much, but I have kept chameleons a long time, and I know what works for me. And so I do try and share that. So I started the YouTube. I write everything. I love to write, so I put everything on my website for free. People just read it and so forth. But I'm always happy to talk about it. So for keeping chameleons, and this applies for pretty much all the common species. It applies to the little guys that I keep, and it applies to like panthers or veileds too. More or less, it's all the same. There's definitely variations between the species. One of the biggest problems with chameleon husbandry is the myth of the screen cage. It's you think of keeping chameleons, and you probably automatically think of a screen cage, right?
Yeah.
It's a complete myth. I hate screen cages for keeping chameleons inside. It's awful. It's terrible for them. This is an animal that needs extremely high humidity at night. And like you put it in a screen cage in an air conditioned or a heated house, and it's bone dry. And so then people spend hours spraying them, hours with a drip system going on over them. This poor chameleon is chugging water all the time because it's dehydrated. where this myth came from is the original pioneers of chameleons in the 80s and 90s. They were all California people. And so they lived in SoCal, where the weather is like basically Madagascar. So they would keep the chameleons outside in these screen cages, and they did great. And so then, like, all these chameleons that have been considered impossible to keep alive forever, now all of a sudden they're living. Now they're living in screen cages. It has to be the screen cage. Nobody stopped to think about the fact that these people were keeping them outdoors in SoCal, where it's like, 70s and amazing humidity for these animals. And then people started doing that for indoors. Now chameleons have to be kept in screen cages. But you're keeping them inside in an air conditioner heated house, and they're desiccating. They're turning into beef jerky. So the best thing you can do for a chameleon is to not keep it in a screen enclosure. Or if you do keep it in a screen enclosure, cover 3 of the 4 sides with something. Like I use like PVC panels or like coroplast sheeting. I keep all of my chameleons in the same, not the same size, but the same type of enclosure as I keep my blue tongue skinks in PVC enclosures with a screen top, some ventilation holes on the side, and that's it. I mist a little bit in the evening when the lights go out, and I mist a little bit in the morning to simulate, and again, Ron was talking about this because he knows what's up with the natural humidity cycles. You want it to be super humid at night and dry out during the day. So it can't be wet, but it has to be humid at night so they can breathe this in. And then when you do that, the chameleons almost stop drinking. They don't need it. Like they live in Madagascar where it won't rain for 3 months, or it won't rain for days and days. But then like you have a chameleon that's kept in Pennsylvania in a screen cage, and it's dying of thirst because it's just not the right humidity. So close off the cage warning. If people need I like PVC enclosures. If you're keeping a smaller species, like the Exoterra Zoomed glass terrariums, like they're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. They have a screen top. They have the ventilation openings down the front. Creates a nice chimney effect. So now the problem is that you have a panther chameleon, that's this big, and there's not many glass terrariums or PVC terrariums that animal will do well in. Right? They need like something that's at minimum 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 foot, and honestly, like 3 foot wide is way better for them. It's a big animal. So the problem is like there's just not enclosed cages, and like companies like Zoomed or whoever else are putting out screen enclosures as like for chameleons, even though it's awful for them, and that's what people are keeping them in. So best thing I can say for people is if you're going to get like a screen cage, cover 3 or 4 of the sides, or work with a smaller species and keep it in a beautifully planted glass terrarium that you can buy in any pet store. I like to plan it. People, said for years that you shouldn't have anything on the bottom of a chameleon enclosure. It's complete nonsense. It's just not true. Full soil on the bottom, live plant in the center of it. Pothos, ficus, schefflera, and any tropical plant you get from Home Depot is fine, really. Bunch of branches around at varying heights. Like with all reptiles, gradients are so important. They need to, give them spots that are warm, give them spots that are cool, shaded, directly underneath the light. They do pretty much require UV light. It's not. I've not seen any good examples of chameleons being kept without UV light. Like with blue tongue skinks, you could point to 100 different breeders and say, well, they're not using UV light and these skinks are healthy. There's real proof, but like there's no real proof for that for chameleons. They really seem to do best with it. So definitely I would say is a requirement for their health. UV light, a bright plant light to grow the plants. I do like misting systems just because I have a large collection. It makes it really easy. For somebody with just one chameleon, you don't need a misting system, but it's a nice peace of mind. But as long as the enclosure is not pure screen, you can get away with just hand misting in the evenings and the mornings. And that should be fine, especially if you have live plants in there, because that really helps with humidity. Chameleons don't need it nearly as hot as people think they do. High to mid 70s as an ambient in general is good. Basking like 85, 90 at the most 90 is probably not even necessary, like 85, pretty good. They are strictly insectivores, so you're not feeding them Pangea or anything else. They do need live insects. But they don't need to eat nearly as much as people think they do. Like when I was coming up, it was the generally accepted knowledge that you had to feed a chameleon every day. Now we know that's just not true. 2 to 3 times a week, a few insects for adults is fine. Babies I do feed almost every day just because they're growing so fast. But adults 2-3 times a week is all they need. Crickets, even like little guys like fruit flies and bean beetles, like dart frog guys would be able to step into chameleons pretty easily. So it's definitely more involved than say a blue tongue or a leopard gecko or a crested gecko or something like that. But I also think that they're easier than a bearded dragon. Honestly, if you set them up correctly, the bearded dragons need such high heat. They need I don't know. I've seen so many health problems with people keeping bearded dragons. Like I can't even count. But like if you set up in they need strong UV, strong heat. Like chameleons are kind of not too much different than a crested gecko. Like ambient room temperatures are pretty good. You don't need anything too hot. You don't need a big, high electricity basking light on there. Keep them humid at night. Let them dry out during the day. Just don't let the enclosure be a dart frog tank and be really, really wet during the day. And they're pretty solid. Captive bred is the most important thing. Like wild caught chameleons it's basically like a ticking time bomb. Like for most people, they're just not going to make it. Like if you don't have a ton of a chameleon experience, you don't know how to acclimate wild caught chameleons. Yeah, there's a pretty decent example. That's one of my older cages. It's kind of ugly, I'll be honest with you, but it has everything. Like it has all the branches. There's a nice, pretty blue tongue. But yeah, it has everything that the chameleon needs in it, though. It's fully planted. So this is like easy. The great thing with that enclosure is I don't pick up poop. The poop falls to the bottom, decomposes. You can throw springtails in there, isopods if you want, but like fungus and whatnot, it breaks all that stuff down. So like if any gets stuck to the leaves, I'll knock it off. But like my blue tongues are more work. I got to get in these things and get out the poop. I got to wipe down the sides. I got to disinfect water bowls and all that. You guys know exactly what I mean. It's a lot of work. Like I have, 30 blue tongues and I have more than 30 chameleons, and the chameleons are less work than the blue tongues, which is kind of surprising.
All right. Are you getting feedback when I'm talking? That's crazy screech. Wow.
No.
Maybe it's just on my side.
I hear it a little bit.
I was going to say that we're going to trade out all of our blue tongues now for chameleons because I got a lot of work to do.
Well, it's like, yeah, it is. Like I'm driving myself nuts. Like it's blue tongue season right now, like breeding season, and I'm driving myself nuts with them. And blue tongues are really easy not in the breeding season, so maybe I'm kind of being a little biased because I'm spending so much time with them right now. But in terms of cleaning, there's nothing to it. Like once it's the initial setup is a little bit more involved, with the soil, with the live plant, with the branches. But once it's set up, you can kind of just leave them be and feed them a couple times a week, and that's it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, not clean up poop smeared all over the walls all the time.
I'd like to welcome Dave Levinson to the show. Dave, is that you being all creepy in the dark over there?
Pretty much.
Do you have a beard?
Yeah, I got a beard now.
Wow.
Yeah, I left my razor somewhere. I'm too Jewish to buy a new one, so now I'm just gonna have a beard.
Just have a beard, man. It's all good.
That's awesome. It's looking good.
Yeah, looking great. But you guys carry on. I'll figure it out.
All right.
Yeah.
I feel like something real goofy is going on behind it, and then you're like gonna turn the light on. You're gonna have like dreadlocks or something. Like surprise!
It's a little greasy up top right now, which makes me look a little bolder. That's about all that's going on right now. Like no one's missing out on anything right now.
So we were just learning about how much easier chameleons are than blue tongue skinks. So
all right. No comments.
Yeah. It's one of those things like where that's something that I would say, and I feel like everyone on earth would disagree with that, but like I think it's for me, it's just because I've been keeping them so long that like for me, it's like the back of my hand, and it doesn't require anything, like any sort of thought. But like, once they're set up correctly, they aren't as captive bred. They just aren't as difficult as people make them out to be. The thing is, it's a little bit of a downside. They don't live that long, like 3-4 years is pretty good, longer if you're lucky, but they straight up just don't live that long, not typically. And that's like definitely a turn off for people. And I understand that, but again, like their fecundity is crazy. Like they breed nonstop. Like they're not having one litter of babies or one clutch of eggs. It's, 4, 5, 6 clutches over 12, 18 months, and, from 12 eggs to 18 eggs for these smaller species. And panthers can have, 20, 30 eggs, something like that.
Can I just say, I really appreciate the fact that you use the word fecundity.
Oh, yeah.
They always give me crap about my big words.
Well, I'm a biology teacher and a science nerd, so like I'll throw them out every now and again. Usually, I won't, because people give me shit about it. But if I can't, so like if you notice, there was like a pause before I said it, because I was actually trying to think of what's a different word that I could use that would maybe not make me seem like such a pompous character. So like, I just decided I was like, I can't think of a better word, so I just said fecundity.
If the word fits, use it. We're all right with that.
All right.
Yeah. I don't know what that word means.
They breed like crazy.
They are good at having sex.
Yep.
Okay.
Lots of babies.
Could it make a rabbit reference in there for like the other half of the industry?
They breed like rabbits.
Yep.
So, all right. So that's the 101 on chameleons.
I guess the reason, because I've always been told to kind of shy away from chameleons because they're very, I guess, fragile. Like they have a tendency to die, and I guess they have a shorter lifespan. But what you were talking about in the beginning about people unknowingly putting them in screen cages and drying them out, and that's probably why everybody thinks they're so fragile, because they're just not keeping them the right way.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. And the other part too that I should mention is they are fragile. This is not an animal that you can hold and play with and just take out whenever you want, right? And that's like, I can take my blue tongue skinks out literally whenever I want, hand them to anyone I want. If my kid wants to hold it for an hour, hold it for an hour. I'm not worried about the health of that animal. A chameleon would do real damage to it. Like so that's one way where they are much more delicate. Like these are not animals that should be held. They don't enjoy it. It's not good for them. They do stress out, right? They are prone to stress. Captive bred, much less so than wild caught. But like, I'm not letting people hold my chameleons. Like every once in a while I'll get them out to check on them and everything. But I don't hold them. I don't play with them. And I think a lot of, pet keepers that run into a lot of problems is they're holding their animals all the time. They're stressing them out. Chameleons aren't good pets in that way. They're amazing display animals. They aren't nearly as difficult as people make them out to be, but they aren't pets. They aren't to be held. They're to be observed. So I think that's another big part of where, and also like the other things too is I have a basement where my animals are kept. In general, it's just me down here, or a couple of my family. If you keep a chameleon in your living room, like next to your television, it's probably not going to do well. It's probably going to be stressed out of its mind, and it's not going to be okay. People coming and going, dogs and cats, TV on, lights on all night long. See, that's the kind of stuff that is true where you can get yourself into trouble with chameleons and they won't do well. If you have a reptile room and they're more or less left alone, captive bred ones are pretty hardy.
So I might have missed a lot of this, and I just heard you guys coming about the screen cages. So again, I do think there's a lot of misinformation out there about chameleons.
Yep.
One of the first random things I got years ago as a kid was a chameleon, and was told everything wrong about it.
Yeah.
Dietary, was told it's best to buy a pair. Like every last thing that was told was the opposite. And of course they didn't make it. And of course, like a lot of newbies, I didn't do my research. Do you have any issues with them seeing the reflection? Because I always remember that being a big argument back in the day, that's why you couldn't keep them in glass cages.
Yep, that is a big argument that people use, and it's just not true. I've kept them in glass cages, at PVC enclosures where it's acrylic. No, it's just I've kept them for years in Exoterra or Zoom Ed rather enclosures, raised tons of babies in glass terrariums or PVC terrariums, and now the whole reflection thing just isn't true. Like I don't know if they can tell the difference or if the angle just doesn't work out most of the time. But yeah, no, it's not a big deal. You keep two of them in an enclosure together, you're going to end up with 2 dead chameleons, probably. But you know what? If you keep 2 blue tongues together in a small enclosure, you're probably going to end up with a dead blue tongue as well. So it's just stuff like that where it does require research. And I was guilty of the same thing. I've been keeping chameleons since I was a kid, and I didn't always do the best research, and I didn't always do the best things for them. Like you shouldn't put one in an aquarium. You know what I mean? Like there's no airflow in an aquarium, but one of those nice Zoom Ed or Exoterra, glass terrariums with the vents in the front, that's perfect. So there's little things like that, and they're definitely more complicated than say a blue tongue. But when they're cared for correctly, when they're set up correctly, they're not too bad.
Sorry, if you guys already talked about this too, like I said, you guys, if I ask a question that's already been asked, you guys just, write the time down and just edit it out.
No, we didn't talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So, how intense did you guys get with dietary stuff?
Haven't touched it yet, other than we need insects.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, they're strictly insectivores. I try to give some variety, but not a huge amount. Primarily, I feed my chameleons crickets, fruit flies, and bean beetles. I culture fruit flies and bean beetles here, so that's like free food for me. Chameleons don't need huge feeder insects. Like even an adult chameleon eating little bean beetles or fruit flies, which like dart frog guys would culture a lot, that does really well for them. Kind of the biggest controversy with chameleons really is dietary is nutritional when it comes to supplements. There's like a big pushback about not using supplements as much anymore. I try to keep it simple as much as I can. I find something that works really well for me and then I kind of stick with it, and I'll experiment with other stuff. But I like things to be simple. And what I use for literally all of my lizards is Repashy Calcium Plus, that all-in-one supplement. So I dust every single feeder insect with that nice light coating and feed it to them every single feeding. That's what it was designed for. Alan Repashy did a lot of research leading up to that, and it works really well. The other really important thing is you can't go to Petco, buy a dozen crickets, drive home and throw them into your chameleon enclosure, dust them or not, and have that be good and healthy. It's not going to be. They need to be gut loaded. The insects need to be fed good, nutritious food. And what I feed my insects, which I think is a real reason why I'm successful with some of the lizards I am, is that I don't give my crickets a commercial diet at all. They only get fresh greens and vegetables and fruit. I'll buy fresh greens for them, and then usually it's like whatever vegetable scraps I have in the house, like anything and everything that I have that's maybe going bad, or just like carrot peelings or chopped up sweet potatoes and things like that. So I think it's really, really important for lizards that are eating live insects, that the food is that what they're eating is getting a good diet. I think that's a huge, huge problem is people go to Petco, they bring them home, they dust them, and they throw them in the cage, and they think that's okay. And they're not getting much out of it. They're not getting as much out of it. So I think that's a big problem that people have.
That's a good tip. A lot of people don't think about that, especially people that are just keeping these as, a pet owner. They have 1 or 2 animals.
Sure. Yeah. And I get that. Like, and I've been there too, a long time ago, but it's complicated. There's a lot of different things to it. So I can understand like why it gets a little overwhelming at times, but like if you want healthy animals, that's the kind of stuff that needs to be done. And I also think that's probably maybe even breeders have some hard time with them. I'm just kind of speculating here, but a lot of people feed their insects commercial diets, dry foods.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. If I eat McDonald's every day, that's not going to be the most healthy for me. And, if you're given just like a dry gut load from wherever to your insects, I don't think that's going to be the most healthy thing for them either. So trying fresh greens and carrots and sweet potatoes, all that sort of stuff, trying to hit a wide assortment of vitamins and minerals as much as I can. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the Calcium Plus, the Repashy Calcium Plus supplement. I think that's great stuff for lizards, man. I use it for everything.
That's awesome.
Are you still working with these satanic leaf-tailed geckos?
I have a similar species. I don't have the satanics, which are the Fantasticus.
Mm-hmm.
I have the spear points, which are Ebanawi.
Okay.
They're a real similar species, except they're smaller and their tails are tiny. They don't have like the big tails. They have real tiny, like spear point tails, they're called. They look almost the same. Like if you don't know Europlatus geckos, then you probably won't tell them apart. So I am working with them, and I just have a trio, but they're cranking out eggs. So I have first baby hatched, and I have like eight eggs incubating. But they're one that they'll lay a pair of eggs, excuse me, a pair of eggs every month. So far, it seems to me. So they're pretty prolific. I just have one trio of them. That's just kind of a little fun side project. My main gecko project are the electric blue geckos. Yeah, there's one, a female laying. That's the Europlatus.
Looks like a leaf.
Looks like a leaf. They're awesome, man. They're like this big. Again, like everything I like, with the exception of the blue tongues, like everything that I keep is like look but don't touch. Just check it out, observe it. Beautiful, interesting behavior. I don't really handle these things. The main geckos that I'm working with, which are like my real passion project and kind of the one that pays the bills around here, are the electric blue geckos, the Lygodactylus williamsi. So they're like the dwarf day geckos that are bright, bright blue.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like cobalt blue. I've been working with those 5-6 years now. There's one that's actually a female, believe it or not. That's like an exceptionally colored female. Males are even more blue than that.
See if I can find another one.
Yeah, there's like if you see like my YouTube cover thing, it was up a little bit. There's a bunch of cams right there, right there in the center.
Dang,
that's a nice male.
That's beautiful.
Oh, they're amazing. They're just see them from across the room, and they're only 3 inches long. That's a critically, I don't know, it's an endangered species from Tanzania. There's CITES 1. They are not coming in anymore. I'm not sending any to Europe. Europe's not sending any here. And I kind of had there's some rumblings going on that was going to happen. So I bought up as many as I could and started breeding as many as I could. And I've been producing over 100 a year for a while. And right now I'm set up to produce in terms of eggs in the incubator right now, I'm going to produce 20 of those every month. And, nice. There's a species that breeds all year round pretty much. And they can, when they're in their like peak in their prime, they're laying a clutch of eggs. They're laying 2 eggs every 2 weeks. So think like one female is giving you an egg a week. So they can be very good too. So that's like that's a big project for me. And they're just amazing. They're always out. Again, like they're this big. You're not holding them. They're not, like things that you're going to take out and show people, but they're always out. They're super bold. People come over and they see them. And they're like awesome display animals. Like you can keep them with dart frogs. Some people do if you do it correctly. They just make like for a beautiful display. And it's just, they are an endangered species and next to no habitat left. So yeah.
Those babies are so small. It's ridiculous.
Seems like everything I was saying this to somebody today. I think it seems like everything I breed, with the exception of blue tongues, hatches out that small.
How do you keep it from getting out of the cage? Like any little crack or crevice, it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, honestly, because like they're so small. Like you can't keep that in a commercially available cage. Like PVC enclosures. There's one of my egg containers. So that's every one of those almost everyone has 2 eggs, sometimes 1 egg. But yeah, I use these PVC enclosures, which have no seams at all. there is a screen insert, but there's no seams that the animals can get out, right? Because like, you know, that tiny little gap that exists in exoterra terrariums, they're getting out of there, man. Like they're one of those species like where, again, you have to figure out the recipe, you have to figure it out. And I share that with everybody, but like until you do, they're a pain in the butt. But once you have it set up, like I don't, like, I just go and I feed them. They're 90% of their diet is Pangea, is crested gecko, you know, diet. And I just give them, you know, a tiny little squirt of that 2-3 times a week. But again, like, because of the way their enclosure is set up, I don't have to clean them, right? The poop falls down into the soil, it decomposes. It's all good.
I apologize. I sort of hijacked the conversation and took us to a new species. So are we all good with talking about geckos now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I really like these. Oh, we lost them again.
Got it. Wrote it down.
The time end, on my end, the time's not even moving.
On your end? My end, it's moving.
It says 46:19. It's been stuck there for God knows how long.
That's weird. All three of you guys are perfect.
It's
Yeah,
ticking
you guys
over
have actually been frozen ever since I got on here, to tell you the truth.
We are?
Yeah, I mean, you guys haven't moved since I got on. He flinches a little bit every once in a while, but yeah, your screens have all been seized up since I got on.
That's weird.
You want to jump out and jump back in real quick since we're waiting on him?
Yeah, maybe. I got LTE some reason instead of 5G. I should be 5G where I'm at. Let me turn my Wi-Fi off and see if that helps, but I don't know what that is. Let me jump on and jump back in, but I'm not sure why mine's doing this. And he's gone completely right now, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'll be right back.
I don't want to. I feel like I'm kind of talking more than I should. So I don't know if you want to ask him the one-on-one on William's Eye or get Dave to do it. Actually, probably I'd like Dave to do it actually because he.
Being quiet.
No offense, Ben, but of the three of us, you know the least amount about animals.
Back. I don't know what happened.
That's cool. Dave was having an issue too, so he's coming back in a second.
Which is good that this isn't live and we cut it up.
Yeah. Then my misting system just kicked on right now, so I don't know if you can hear that cranking in the background. No.
Not really.
Oh, good.
What are you using? Miss King?
Yeah. Yeah, I have the Miss King high capacity pumps. I have 2 of them going right now. Each one can easily do 70 nozzles, 70 cages. So
That's
I have
cool.
2 of them set up, one for my babies and then one for the adults, because the bigger enclosures get misted a little bit longer. The smaller ones get misted a little bit less.
It's definitely the way to go when you got that many cages, man.
Oh, I mean, it couldn't be done. Like with the type of the tropical animals that I keep, like indoors in Pennsylvania, like you have to have it, you know, pretty much for the number of animals.
Mm-hmm. We have a Mist King.
Yep.
I'll use it for anything at the moment.
Yeah.
We had this grand plan that we were going to have a wall of tree monitors.
Okay.
That we needed to have misting systems. They're all going to be live planted and all this other stuff. And the first initial cage that we bought is still sitting there empty and nothing. My house is busting at the seams.
They're awesome animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are we looking now, Dave?
Yeah, everyone's moving around a lot better now, it looks like.
Jewish elbows.
Fingers to this? I don't know. I just think of weird stuff sometimes. So, Dave, I think you were just about to ask about the care of the Williams Eye.
Was I? Because I think that's what you were about to ask, I think.
No, that you were definitely going to do it.
You think I was going to do that?
Yeah,
Okay, we can go with
felt
that.
that way.
Well, let's hear about some care on these guys.
Okay. So if anyone's ever kept any other day geckos, like the grandest day geckos, they're real similar. So a solid side enclosure, like a glass terrarium or a PVC cage, is good. Screen top, they do need UV. They pretty much need it, honestly, because there's been times where I'll notice something going wrong with the animals, like they don't look right, or a female will stop laying eggs, and then I'll check and like, oh, the UV bulb went and I missed it. And I didn't notice that the UV bulb went. So like, you know, they're probably not going to die without it, but they're not going to do well without it. So they do need UV light. I use Reptisun 10.0 bulbs on everything. A lot of people think that's overkill. But if you compare, and I have a UV meter, if you compare the UV light output of your highest output bulb and compare it to the sun, it's not even close. So I like the higher UV bulbs, and then just give a lot of live plants in the center where the animals can shade themselves if they want to. For the Williamsi, I really like Sansevieria, which are the snake plants, real thick, waxy leaves, kind of succulent-like. But any sort of plant, I use pothos a lot. Pothos is really cheap, and you get it at every Home Depot. It grows like mad. So that works really well. So a soil bottom on the enclosure, you go bioactive, you don't have to. Yeah, that's the plant right there, that's Sansevieria. And then I cut bamboo poles, dried bamboo, exactly to size so that I can wedge them horizontally, in between the cage sides, varying levels underneath the basking light, underneath the UV light, vertically, diagonally. I'll throw just as many in there, give them lots of choices, lots of places they can move around. They don't need a huge enclosure, a pair of them, no problem, in an 18-inch cube. So 18 by 18 by 18 for an adult pair is no problem at all. A little bit bigger if you want to keep a male and 2 females. Never keep 2 males together. Males will either kill each other or suppress one so much. I feed them like 80–90% of their diet is Pangea, crested gecko diet. I like to use the with insects formula because it has insects in it, and they're primarily insectivores in the wild. So 2-3 times a week with that. I do give them fruit flies maybe once or twice a week, but that's just kind of random. They don't need it, but it gets them hunting, gets them acting naturally. So try to give them to the every now and again. But honestly, if somebody just wanted to raise them on Pangea, they could. I've done it. They're fine. They're healthy. So if you don't want to do live insects with them, you don't have to. It is maybe a little bit more natural to do so, but you don't need to.
Okay.
Basking spot, pretty hot, like 90, 95. High 70s is really good as an ambient. Cool them down at night. 60, 65 is no problem. Even less, if it gets lower in your room or wherever you are. To breed them, they're egg gluers, so this is where they're a little bit of a pain in the butt. So they glue their eggs on a hard surface, and once it's set, you are not getting those eggs off without destroying them. And that's where a lot of people ran into difficulty. What I did, and that's really helped me a lot with them, is I've stripped down the enclosure as much as possible. There's nothing on the sides of it at all. The bamboo poles are wedged in, so they can't lay in the bamboo. And I've taken these floral tubes that they put like single insert like flower stems in, and I Velcro them up around the sides of the enclosure. And the females like that tight spot, and they get up in there, they lay their eggs. And then because it's Velcroed, I can just pull it out, put it into my incubation box just like you saw. In my experience, they don't do well with a steady incubation temperature. They lay these things on leaves in the middle of the forest, wide open in the canopy with air blowing and sun on them, rain on them. Like, I don't think they do well with like steady conditions or stagnant conditions. So I don't put them in like a set temperature. I let the temperature go up and down, like high 70s during the day, maybe 80 degrees, 60s at night. They hatch within 3 months almost always. They are temperature sex dependent in general. Higher temps, you get like 84, 85. Most of them are going to be males. You get below like 75, 76 in that area, pretty much all females. I try to aim for high 70s, 80 degrees. I try to get a nice mix of the sexes, like 50-50. But that's about it. I do mist them, just like with the chameleons. They don't drink out of a water bowl. Spray them. I try to mimic the natural humidity cycles where it's more humid at night. Let them dry out during the day. People tend to water these things too much. They cannot be wet all the time. Nice and humid at night, completely dried out during the day. Repeat the cycle. And just like everything, cycle them in the winter, let them cool down. I can't get them to stop breeding. You know, it'll be 60 degrees at night with no basking spot in the winter, and the females will still lay. They might not lay every 2 weeks, but they'll lay every month. They still keep going. Yeah, but you know, they live a long time. Like, I have geckos that are like pushing 10 years old at this point. You know, and these, you know, we're talking geckos this big that's living 10 years or more. You know, so yeah.
So I had something to add real quick. One thing that Ryan McVeigh was on, and we talked about, one thing that he found was a good idea that works for him for the egg gluers.
Yeah.
Is to use, and I'll bring it up real quick, a product like this, where they go in and they'll lay the eggs on the roof of that little tiny cave.
Okay.
And then he takes the whole thing and puts it in the incubator.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I mean, that would definitely work. Like, if you have like a pair or two, that's great. But I buy 100 of those floral tubes at once. You know what I mean? Because I got, like, you know, and I don't know if the Williams was he using that with arboreal geckos, like day geckos?
I think he was using it with
what was the what was it? Prasinus or whatever, the green.
Oh yeah, the Gastrophilus prasinus, the keelback lizards. Yeah, they do glue. Yeah, those are perfect for them because they do bury in the soil. Like, they glue their eggs together, and they'll like glue them to like cork or whatever else. So that's like perfect for them. A lot of the European guys use like a clay pot that they turn upside down. You know. So that's perfect for them. These, like the day geckos, they're all up at the top of the terrarium, though. They're all at the top. So, like, I doubt that they would go down for that, but, you know.
Yeah, I was just thinking if there's something in there that they would like to get close to that you could dismantle.
For sure. Yeah, and that's what it's all about, is if anything that glues its eggs, you want to set it up so that they lay in something that you can remove, that you can get out of there. You know, because otherwise you're not getting it out. And the thing that sucks about these guys is if the babies hatch in the enclosure, the parents will eat them. They have some species of day gecko are communal, and they'll take care of the babies and they'll leave them alone. These guys are vicious. They'll eat their babies, no problem. It's awful. So yeah, with that species, best to get them out and give them a spot to lay in that you can remove.
So what's your customer base like for a species like this? Like, what's your demographic? I know you said
just about to ask that question.
Okay. You know, it's funny because I haven't really paid attention to demographics too much, but I feel like it's pretty varied. It's quite a bit. Like, I'll have younger guys. I have, you know, older ladies that want a nice terrarium. Honestly, it's all over the place. They're kind of like, you know, like with dart frogs or like day geckos, people just see them for the colors and they love them. Like, but you know, it's not snake guys that are buying them. You know, it's definitely not. So I don't know. Like, I feel like the demographics I get are pretty diverse, but it's not the same people that would message me if I say posted milk snakes or carpet pythons for sale. So I feel like not a lot of snake keepers are into that sort of thing.
Do you think you know, people are like, oh, I really want a Panther's chameleon because they're awesome, they're big and stuff. Are they just like, hey, I want any chameleon? Or since you have very specific, you know, and what are the prices like? Just kind of a range. So maybe that kind of weeds people out as well.
Yeah, the prices. So Panther chameleons, like, the market for them is pretty high right now, even though it's like super saturated. But the prices are still relatively high. So Panther chameleons are one of those things where if you go to a well-known breeder, you're going to pay $400 for a Panther chameleon. But at the same time, you're going to find people dumping them on fauna for like $50 a piece because, you know, like I said, they're prolific. And if you're not careful, and if you get a couple of clutches at once, you're going to end up with 50, 100 baby chameleons on your hands. And if you don't know, if you aren't set up for that, that's going to be a lot of money and food, and people will dump them. So it just depends where you're, you know, from a real breeder, from someone that's like established. Panther chameleons are anywhere from $200 to $400 a piece. They're the more common ones. the stuff that I breed is less common, but I don't charge any more for them. I charge even like less because they only live like 2-3 years, you know, longer if it's males. Like 2-3 years is if you're breeding them a lot. If you're not breeding them, they can live longer if it's just a pet. But like my carpet chameleons, I sell males for $200 a piece and females for $300. For the minor chameleons, which are much more rare, males for $300 and females for $450. So that's, and I can maybe charge a little bit more than that, but like it's not a blue tongue skink that will live for 20 years. Like I have no problem charging $300-$400 for a blue tongue. It's like you can have that animal for a couple of decades, you know. But like a chameleon, like for me, like it's a nice, beautiful display animal. But I think they're just such like an untapped breeding project because they can be bred, you know, pretty well. It's definitely more niche than a lot of stuff for sure. So like I do worry about, I'm not going to produce 1,000 chameleons in a year, even though I could. If I wanted to, I could produce 1,000 chameleons. But like, could I sell 1,000 chameleons at the price that I wanted? Probably not. Probably not.
Not at that price, but at feeder price maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I thought about that too. Is like, you know, carpet chameleons in particular. Like, you know, you missed a little bit of this in the beginning, Dave. Like they're this big. You know, like that's way easier to take care of than a panther chameleon. They're just as pretty. They live just as long, really, depending on how you keep them. And they're only this big. They can live in a little glass terrarium that you buy in any Petco. Like, it's for me. I'm like, well, why aren't they? They should be sold as commonly as panther chameleons are. You know, like not, you know, obviously like the conditions at most Petcos and whatnot, they kind of suck for reptiles. But, you know, like why, for me, they could be a bigger market. And, you know, we'll see how it goes. Nobody's really tried to do it with like the lesser, you know, less common species, but there are people that produce hundreds, if not thousands of panther chameleons in a year that wholesale those out all over the place.
So one of the things I was curious about as I'm looking through your Facebook page right now and seeing all the different species you work with, we were talking earlier before we actually started the podcast about the business aspect of things. I noticed that a lot of what you're working with is more uncommon or rare. And I wonder how that affects your approach as a business, because we have our little pet projects too, where we like our file snakes and our porphyraceous and all these other kind of rare things. But there's got to be a strategy to that, right? Like, are they rare because, like, why are they rare? Is there not a market for them, or is there a market that you could develop? Or like, what do you like? You're saying I wouldn't do 1,000 chameleons a year because you couldn't sell them, but like, why not? Like,
yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I could, and that's something that I'm really working on and I think about constantly. I chose a lot of the more rare stuff because I think if anyone does know me, it's for like more uncommon stuff, because that's just always what I've done. I've tried to do things that are a little bit more difficult, and in general, I'm usually successful with it. And I think that's kind of what for the few people that know me, what I've got known for. And so I bred panther chameleons for a while, and they sold a little bit, but quite honestly, it's kind of a pain in the butt. Like, I don't know how you guys do it, like dealing with like, the fact that there are so many breeders of a particular species out there. And it's just like, I don't know, it just, for me, like I'd rather, my strategy has been to, everybody wants to set themselves apart in business, and you want to set yourself apart by having like a quality product or a quality animal that you're producing. For me, the first thing that I try to do is I'm going to set myself apart by not working with the common stuff. I'm going to figure out how to make these animals, easy to care for, or at least possible, like to figure out like how to actually, produce these animals in large numbers, because a lot of people just haven't done it. So that's just kind of the way that I wanted to set myself apart. And whenever I look at a species, there are dozens of chameleon species that I think are interesting that I could work with, but they're this big, same size as the ones I'm working with, but they're brown or they're green, and so I chose the two species I did because they're rainbows, because they're gorgeous. Like, you need, unfortunately, you look at a veiled chameleon, you know, people are breeding those like crazy, but they sell for $20 a piece. You know, like something like that, you know, anybody that sees this, I think, you know, whether you're a snake guy or whatever you're into, like, I think that everybody can at least appreciate that that is a beautiful animal.
Mhm.
And so, and because of the fact that you don't see that all over the place, you know, for me, that's what I was going for, as I wanted stuff that catches you know, people's eyes, and just something different. And so it is a little bit of a different marketing thing. So I'm trying to put information out there to try to make these less common species more accessible to people, if that makes sense.
So that's what kind of the follow-up question would have been. Are you actively trying to expand that market, or are you just trying to, like, I know sometimes you just focus in your niche and you like sell into that collector base that we all know is there. Are you actually like what kind of steps are you using to try to take it to the masses, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to expand it because one of the main things that I'm pushing for is I want people to understand, like, these smaller species of chameleon or gecko that I'm keeping, is they are less common, but they're not more difficult. So I'm trying to hopefully push out there, like, for instance, these carpet chameleons or minor chameleons. The main thing that I'm trying to push out there to people and to expand the market greatly, and it's completely true, is that they are easier to take care of than panther chameleons. They are easier to take care of than veiled, not more so. They're easier because they're this big. The amount of food and the amount of space and the amount of electricity that you have to put into a panther chameleon or a veiled chameleon is 4 times, 5 times as much as a carpet chameleon, as a minor chameleon. So, like, you know, that's what I'm trying to do to expand the market. And it is definitely, you know, I don't know how long it'll work, but it's definitely working. Like, there are a lot of people, most of the people that contact me about the chameleons are not breeders, are not collectors. They want a terrarium in their house that they can plant, make it look nice, and put a beautiful animal in it. And so, and that's what I think is there. And no, it's not something that you can handle, you know, very easily, but it's also not something that's going to take giant poops and smear them all over the wall like a blue tongue or like a snake or something like that. And it's going to be out all day long. And this is an animal that has bright colors. Its eyes move independently. It shoots its tongue, you know, the length of its body across the cage to catch insects, you know, and, like, what's not to love about that? So I think that there is, for this small, my thing, I guess, with them is, like, for the smaller chameleon market, is to just expand that out there and be like, this is easier, this is better than keeping these larger chameleons. They aren't harder, and it's actually cheaper for you to do it. And I've proven, I think, that, you know, with what I've done, that it can be done relatively simply. Now, again, they are chameleons. They aren't as simple as, say, you know, as a snake or as a leopard gecko, but they aren't, like, way more complicated. And I think they're easier than, you know, something like a bearded dragon, you know, that huge big cage, very powerful UV light, strong basking light. These animals don't need that. So it's kind of like a little bit more difficult crested gecko or gargoyle gecko.
So, with a species with a short lifespan, like you've been saying, exactly how do you plan holdbacks every year? Like, because of course you're gonna have a fallout based on, again, the 2 to 3 to 4 year life cycle. Yep. So how many do you plan on holding back a year based on what you know you're gonna need for the future?
So it depends how many I want to produce. Like, I've been expanding every year, and now I'm getting to a point, because it is just me. Like, so I'm starting to think about, like, well, how many of these can I actually handle to raise up? How many do I realistically think I can sell at this price? So it is something that I think about constantly. And what I tend to do is I'll hold back. I mean, I hold back every year enough to replace my existing animals, you know, just in case, sort of thing. And then if I end up with extras that end up being like young adults, then I'll sell those. Because, you know, like with anything, you know, sometimes stuff doesn't go right. You know, like, in general, you know, they do well, but they don't always. You know, just like if you have 100 animals, 100 animals are not going to be in perfect health. So like I do tend to hold back a little bit extra. And I'm pretty good about at this point of calculating how many eggs will I get out of this female, right? So how many eggs will I be able to produce out of this? And I can't remember if I talked about this before you were on or not, but one of the interesting things about chameleon breeding is that their eggs have a real long lifespan of incubation, where it's like 6 to 9 months. But the cool thing about it is you can manipulate their incubation. They have to go through a diapause, a cooling, to trigger development. So I could put them in this cooling period to kind of pause, and then I could leave them in this mini fridge for 30 days, or I could leave them in there for months. And so what I've been able to do now is to stagger my hatchlings so that I know I will have X number hatching in this month, this number hatching in this month. So now I have it set up where I can have a slow and steady stream all year round. And it's just a matter of me thinking to myself and doing the calculation. How many cages do I have? How many enclosures? How many am I reasonably going to be able to fit? How old is this female? Like, when am I going to need to replace this female this year, or am I going to need to replace her next year? But basically what I do is I hold back as many animals as I want to breed, especially for females. I'll hold back as many animals as I want to actually breed that year. And if I end up with extra, I'll just sell the extra as young adults. And these animals are adults in 6 to 8 months. Carpet chameleons, I've had a carpet chameleon mate at 3 months old.
Holy crap.
A male. Yeah, like I would never mate a female that young, but I've had a male carpet chameleon mate at 3 months old. Half grown, but fully developed sexually. You know, a female I would never breed until she's 6, 8 months old and full size. But yeah, they grow crazy fast.
So with the egg staggering, which is a very unique thing for reptiles, how far can you push the limits? Like, how far are people taking it to where it's like, oh, fuck, I've waited too long?
Yeah. Nobody knows. As far as I know, I'm the only person that's playing around with that right now. Now, every chameleon breeder knows that you have to diapause eggs. You have to cool them to get them to develop. I did a podcast with Bill Strand, who's a big chameleon guy. He has a real good chameleon podcast talking about that. So as far as I know, I'm the only one experimenting with it. I've had eggs in the cooling. I think the most I had them in so far was 3 or 4 months. Eventually, I want to push that to 6 months. I will tell you this. Sometimes even with the diapause, the eggs won't develop. So I had eggs of minor chameleons where do the normal thing. After 30, 45 days, I put them in the mini fridge at 60 degrees, 55 degrees, leave them in there for 45 days or less or longer, whatever I prefer. But then I took them out after like 40 days, sat them there. After a year, 12, 13 months, no development. None. You candled the eggs. There's nothing going on, but they didn't mold. They didn't collapse. So I'm like, well, we'll try it again. Put them in the mini fridge again for another 45 days. Brought them back out, and then 4 months later, they hatched. So we're talking like 16 months these things were in. So basically, these things were in stasis for a year. Whatever caused them to not trigger, I don't know. But I've seen that more than once. And I know other keepers that have seen this, where they've had carpet chameleon eggs over a year before they start to develop, 13, 14, 15 months, where something the diapause did not get cool enough or whatever, it wasn't long enough. I don't know. But it's chameleon diapause is pretty interesting. And again, like as far as I know, nobody else is really working with it. I had a professor from Stanford University contact me over the summer, and he wanted to do some work together on it. Like he's doing killifish, little fish, and he's doing diapause with their eggs too. So I haven't heard back from him, so I don't know what happened with him. But like, in terms of in the reptile industry, I don't know of anybody that's playing around with it, that's experimenting with it. But so there's a case of where I put them in diapause 2 times, and it took over a year. Like I kind of think, that it could be not like indefinite, But like 6 months, a year, I could see it. You know, I don't know. I've done 4 months, and they'll develop and they'll hatch. I'll keep playing around with it.
You ever think about doing this? So, you know, put them in the diet pause or whatever for like a month or whatever. Make sure they're good, and then ship like cold eggs to somebody else.
Yeah.
And then have them 4 months. You know, 4 months later, they can just hatch out their own.
People do that.
Do they?
Yeah. People have been doing that for years. So they'll send $50 chameleon egg. They'll do that. So the problem with that is, and like it's generally like frowned upon, is because chameleons when they hatch out are friggin' tiny. They're tiny. Like you saw, like an adult is this big. You know, like they're the size of my fingernail. They're tiny. When they hatch out, they're delicate. Like if you don't have experience raising chameleons, it's not easy. And when I send somebody a chameleon that I bred, it's at minimum 2 months old and usually 3 months old. So it's gone from this big to this big. It's solid at that point. Like unless you're giving crap care, it's going to be fine for you. But that first 2 to 3 months, like if you have not had experience and worked through some kinks, like you're probably not going to do well with that egg that you got in the mail. Maybe there's been success stories, like, and again, people have been doing this for years, where they'll send panther chameleon eggs. Like, why buy a panther chameleon for $200, $400 when I can send you an egg for $50? But then what if the egg doesn't develop? That happens too.
So what would you say you're compensating for in life by working with all these very teeny weeny little species?
So it's actually the opposite, because if I was working with retics, that's the compensation. Because of the fact that I'm okay with these little things means that I'm much more secure.
Yeah,
I don't drive a giant truck. I don't have an 18-foot reticulated python. I'm okay with working with these little lizards.
Oh, shots fired. Hashtag retic life. Come on.
Listen, as a zookeeper, I worked with retics. I love retics so much. I worked with multiple 18-foot retics. I had my windpipe collapsed by a reticulated python. I love them, but I think that they're amazing animals. For me, it's like, it's space. I only have so much space in here. I don't have space to keep, and snakes just don't do it for me. Like, I like them. I've worked with them professionally, and I've kept them, here and there. But like, it's just not my cup of tea, when it comes to breeding. Is like lizards are just my passion. You know what I mean? And so but most lizards I can't keep in a rack. Like snakes, like blue tongues. So like, I have to be space efficient. So if I want to do this in such a way where I'm making, a reasonable amount of money to offset all this, and and hopefully a little bit more, I need to be space efficient. So that's why, for me, it's all the little stuff. That's what I'll tell myself anyway.
Okay. God, I feel like I have a few more questions on this whole topic. Yeah, you guys have anything for a second? I got to work this out of my head a little bit.
Okay.
Do you want to move on to a new species? Because
Well, I mean, at some point we're going to get on blue tongues. I'm sure a lot of people watching this episode actually came on here to hear more about blue tongues, and we've, I don't know how much longer we want to make them wait.
For sure.
We could do that. We could get into
blue that's tongue. Fine.
Blue tongue or go home. You know what I'm saying?
Shoot.
What?
Hey, man, that's like one of my favorite things. Is like, I'll be watching an episode of you guys. It'll be snakes, and then like, come on, let's get to the blue tongues. I want to hear the blue tongues. That's why I'm here.
Well, there's a good point there. And like I said, we talked about this too, and it comes up a lot, is the community doesn't really even know what the community is in blue tongues. There's people, like we said, have been doing this for years, including you, Frank. You've been doing this longer than me. But there's people that have done it. It's just
25 years.
Yeah, forever. And there's not like a million people like you, but there's a lot of people in the industry that really had a love for this species early on and started working with it regardless of popularity. The popularity thing, is just kind of a weird thing, and we talk about that a lot. And even like some of the species you work with, some of these smaller, obscure animals, I'm sure even the value of those animals have gone up over the last 5 years. You know, even with you making them more readily available, it doesn't matter just because, again, this industry as a whole has boomed. I think even during this last year with the pet industry all the way to fish, the reptile industry grew more this year than it has in any other year, in my opinion. And even again, like the fish market exploding for the first time in years this year. And, you know, we've discussed even like SPCA had adoption rates like through the roof this year, waiting lists for people to get dogs and cats. You know, said it's you know, skinks were a weird one because they deserved to be popular years ago. I always thought they were a better alternative than a bearded dragon based on diet and size. Just, you know, it's cool they got popular when they did. And again, the best thing about when they got popular is it really was a good time because, you know, we bring up the dark animals you work with. And, you know, we know some of that lineage, you know, there was some dark stuff that Rebecca started with. And then Diana kind of took it in her direction. And then you buying stock from Diana is now taking it to the next level. We all knew you could get there. Somebody could get there with a dark animal, just like we knew an orange could get more orange and a yellow could get more yellow. But what still really has blown me away about skinks, and then we'll get into all the fine print of this, but how fast we got here once we put the effort in. You know, we had our Turner Whites back in the day, and we did have our sunset stuff and sunrise. But, you know, now that we have guys that are really keying in on things and just trying to perfect certain things, to see that fast, I really can't even comprehend it. You know, I've always made jokes that a lot of things that take 3 to 4 generations of breeding with anything line breeding, especially stuff I've done with bows over the years, talking to Jeff, both the Jeffs at JMG, and how many years it took them to perfect certain geckos they're working with. How are we peaking so fast with this species when we've only put an effort into it for the last 6 years, in all honesty? And I don't know, like I said, I love how fast we got there, but have you peaked, buddy? Can you get any better than that? Like when you take that best one and put it with the best one, what do you think you will see next generation with that line breeding?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a big part of it is like they're phenotypically diverse. Like I would pop out weird blue tongues 20 years ago, like just like a random one. Like I'd have a litter, like 2 completely normal looking animals, and like pop one out that'd be all silver. You know, like it's just random. Like one of the things I was saying before you got on is like I've been keeping blue tongues a very long time. Like and I've been straight keeping them for 25 years. But like I only had, for most of that time, I only had a couple pairs, a couple animals. Because when I first started breeding them, they were actually the first reptile that I ever bred. I was still in high school, bred Northerns, and I would go to Hamburg, have 1/3 grown, perfect Northern blue tongue skinks, you know, 20 years ago when they weren't common, when they weren't all over the place. I'd have them on my table and I couldn't sell them for $150. Couldn't sell them. And most of my litters when I was in high school, I wholesaled to Linda Switzer for like $75, you know, and like she would buy my whole litter. Anyway, one of those, I got an email from Austin, message from Austin a couple of years back, like, hey, I acquired this animal. This is something that you produced back in the 90s from Linda Switzer. And it's like this pure silver animal, like no pattern, pure silver. I'm like, yeah, like I pop one of those out every now and again. And I just never really thought about it. I never got into, I just kind of kept a little bit of everything. I bred a little bit, but I didn't think about anything long-term. I didn't like try projects. I didn't, you know, I was just like, just keeping for enjoyment, trying to learn a little bit. And it's only been in the past 5, 6, 7 years where I've really kind of tried to take it in that direction, and be more serious about it. And I just saw like the huge potential in blue tongues. And, you know, I've had them for all that time, and I stopped breeding them for years. I just straight up, even though I had a couple pairs, I stopped breeding them. Like I can't sell them. You know, I could not for what I, you know, not for more than $100, not easily anyway. And then of course they exploded. I'm like, oh shit, all right, I'm gonna start breeding blue tongues again. Luckily, Diana was real close to me, where I used to live up in northern Pennsylvania. She was like an hour's drive. So that I found her, I met her, and I just, every animal that she was selling, I'd be like, I'll buy it, you know, and like eventually it was like, listen, because she didn't like, you know, she wasn't into, you know, like shipping and all that stuff too much. So I was like, listen, if you have something you don't want to ship, just message me and I'll drive up there and I'll buy it. And so then I just started collecting animals from her, getting a few other odds and ends from different people. But I do think that we have a ways to go. Yeah, like I think we're going to see northerns that are going to be pretty much solid orange. I'm pretty sure we're going to see northerns that are going to be solid black minus the head. I have a couple that have real nice, that have black eye bands, blacker than a Eastern eye band. But like the head is bone white. I don't know about that. I don't know if we're getting that head black. Maybe, but like, because it's like you said, like it's moved so fast so quickly. It took me 2 generations to go from dark classics to an animal with a 95% solid black body. It took me 2 generations to do that. And I did not breed, and I wasn't breeding like offspring to mom or anything like that. I got a number of animals, and yeah, they're all probably from the same line. But I would just breed the darkest ones I had from different litters. And like I said, like it just took 2 generations of being very careful about which ones I wanted to pair. And here I have a couple animals, like you showed that one picture, but I have one now that after it had its post-brumation shed, like it's black. It's just black, you know, and that one's dark and it has the most black pigment and the least amount of white on it. But I have others like where it's like it's not a mutation axanthic, but it's like in a phenotypically appearance wise, it's like 99% axanthic. It's black. Like, and I have like, I can't even tell, like I have like 7 of them that I held 7 black ones back. That's one of the nicer ones. I have one that has less white speckling on it than that. But that's one of the ones where it's just like, it's like white and black. But for the head and the eyes, you would think it was axanthic, right? You would think that was like just like, or you know, like one of those New Guinea ones that they produce that's just black and white. Like you look at the head and you can tell it's not. I don't think it's a mutation. But man, it's close to the appearance wise. But yeah, I don't think we peaked. I think we can definitely make more progress there.
Well, I do think there's still a lot of room. I'm not saying for all projects that we've all hit the peak. I will say with your dark project, I do agree that, you know, the head is going to be a very tough thing. You know, if maybe 5 or 10 years down the road, there's some other lineage that suddenly starts getting darker pigment in the head, maybe that can get crossed into it to try to get you there. Maybe it'll be a step back the first generation and 2 steps forward on the next one. But, you know, like you said, the skinks as a whole were very peculiar the way the whole thing developed. You know, there were a few key players back in the day when a lot of people weren't putting effort in based on, like you said, a species that nobody cared about. And I don't know where you were located at Hamburg, but when you walk in the front of Hamburg, are you to the far left when you set up?
Yeah, far left.
I used to look at your skinks all the time back in the 2005 to 2010, I want to say.
So that wasn't me. That was captive bred excellence. I was before that.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that. You're probably right.
I was late 90s for that.
Yeah, I never put a face to the animals, but I just remember I'd go to Hamburg, I'd do my walkthrough at the beginning of the show, and there'd always be somebody set up to the far left with a few blue tongues.
That was captive bred excellence or specialty. So that's Don Schwartz, I think is his last name. And he stopped breeding last year, and I bought out his collection.
Yeah, I saw that
because he had some phenomenal skinks. He had some phenomenal skinks, and he didn't really want to ship them. And it was 2 Hamburgs in a row. He's trying to sell his collection. I'm walking by and I'm seeing these skinks, and one of them's like this gorgeous white animal with salmon color, and they're all gorgeous. And I'm just looking at him like, oh. And he's like, buy them all, give you a deal. And then I was like, I can't. And then like a couple months later, I'm like, I saw him post an ad on Facebook. I'm like, all right, what's your best price on all of them? He tells me the price, and I go, all right, get in my car. I'll be there in 2 hours. So yeah, he had some great animals. So I did buy him out when he stopped just last year.
So what is with the all of a sudden trend of these breeders that put in years and years and years of working with a species like this, and sadly now when it finally gains popularity, they're all jumping ship. There's been so many people that have done this for years that suddenly are now getting out of it. It just seems I'd say from a business standpoint, the worst time to be getting out of a species that at one point 4 years ago was peaking, and as we all know since then has slowly been on the decline. I think it needs a level out. I know you're going to be like, oh man, but I sell out every single year.
No, I'm 100% with you. Actually, I'm actually a little worried. I'm a little worried about it. I'm glad. I only have 30 animals, and
Yeah.
I was going to keep more. I produced about 100 babies last year, and I kept 10. And at the time, I was like, am I making the wrong decision here? Am I selling too many? Because I exported like 40 of them too.
Yeah.
But like, am I selling? But like, and now I'm a little worried about the market. I'll be honest with you.
But we all kind of should.
Was
Sorry,
that?
I didn't mean to interrupt you on that. I was just saying that we all can and should be worried about a market. Now, the reality is, and everything will level out, and it might be by the level out factors. A lot of people might get out, and then eventually the demand will go back up because, of course, everything and anything is supply and demand.
Yeah.
But it was kind of something that we all kind of saw coming, and the reality too, like with this past year, this was the best year for reptiles ever. And again, a species that what you did this year probably got more attention in skinks than anybody else. I don't even know what the fuck's going on with skinks half time, so I don't think I'm in any of the groups anymore. So I couldn't tell you what was more mainstream or what was like a highlight animal, but I keep telling you year after year, I reach out to you and let you know what you're doing are highlight animals to me. Because again, everybody was obsessed with melanistics, and now you are 95% to a melanistic and a pure northern animal, and that excites a lot of people. So, what you're doing right now, especially now that you're doing your YouTube channel, people like you stepping up and doing stuff like that, I think is going to draw more people in. We're not even dabbling in what you're doing on that project. Like, we aren't even close yet to what you've done in just 2 generations.
Well, hopefully it'll continue. The thing, this season is going to be the one for me where I'm super curious about how it's going to go. And I'll be honest, I'm glad I don't have 100 skinks, which I very nearly pulled the trigger on, last season. I was like, should I just have 100 skinks and just go for it? But like, I'm just, hopefully it's going to be better than we think, but like it's, and hopefully like, good names will rise to the top. The fact that you can go on Morph Market and find over 100 pure northerns right now, and many of which are gorgeous animals, it's yeah. But then again, you can go on Morph Market and you can find 10,000 ball pythons, but that's all right. That the market's still amazing and people are buying them. I wonder with blue tongues, because like they are a bit of a pain in the butt when it comes to breeding. So like they're touchy little buggers. Like I've always had pretty good luck with them. But it's not leopard gecko breeding. It's not crested gecko breeding. I don't breed snakes. I don't breed ball python, so I can't even say it's not ball python breeding because I have no idea what that's like. But like yeah. I mean, from what I see, from what I understand, like it seems pretty straightforward. Like blue tongues are not like they're weird. Like you have animals that take years off all the time, males and females. We're just like, I'm not breeding this year. Or you'll have animals that'll breed and not produce anything. I've never had any slug out. That's not true. I've had one that slugged out. That's not like a thing but I have had animals just straight up like, I'm not breeding this year. And I know it's not my care, and I know it's not what I'm doing because I have 15 other animals that are gangbusters that are going like crazy, that are breeding like crazy. And then I just have these couple animals that aren't breeding, or I have yearling males that are trying to breed but can't get the job done. And so it's just, it's like you said, like it's not like the huge investment potential that there is with ball pythons or even milk snakes or something like that. I don't know. Because
I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, I'm just kind of spouting here.
No, and it's good. And like I said, I try not to do all the talking, but I shut the fuck up for the first hour today, so I'm gonna make up for lost time.
Good.
And again, I like these discussions because I think it's a healthy, good discussion that needs to be had. Again, comparing to ball pythons and ball python prices, again, what really determines the price of an animal? And in the end of the day, it's somebody willing to spend that much money on something. There's no reason for a ball python to be $70,000 out of the wild, except for the fact that there's someone willing to spend $70,000. And the same thing goes for what we do, and the same thing goes for any species. Your blacks, in my opinion, are worth more money than any other line-bred skink in the industry right now. Because again, the melanistic is one of the reasons that species has always been popular, something that no one could ever have. And now you are providing something so incredibly close to it, it's not even funny. And it's not like you're providing it because we know you're hoarding all those motherfuckers back, and I don't blame you.
I didn't sell one last year. I didn't sell one.
Yeah, as you shouldn't have. And like I said, we've talked a little on the side. We're gonna have a lot of discussions about this upcoming year because this is the one thing I'm obsessed over, and I don't like not being able to have something. We know how we are. Everybody wants what they can't have. But in my opinion, the reality is with a dark animal like that, if a melanistic is selling for $10,000, why is that animal not worth $2,500? And the only thing that would make it not worth $2,500 is when no one's willing to spend that money. But the moment that you set a market at that much and someone comes out and buys it, suddenly that is what it's worth moving forward. And that's the problem with some of our middle ground animals that we're keeping at a little higher price for what their maybe potential breeding could be for the future. But we're also not educating the public on what the potential is on putting certain animals as a building block on a line bred project. So like I said, I think there's a lot of problems with that group as a whole, but I think one of the bigger things is misinformation. And you're talking about the difficulties of breeding. I will say that things can go wrong with breeding blue tongue skinks, and we all know that. And it is a little more of a hands-on animal. But the reality is it's a animal that you get 2 or 3 locks out of over the course of, me personally, I spread 2 to 3 locks over anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, where some people go gangbusters over like a week or so. I've always been kind of stagger it out just in case you don't catch your window. But as you know, just from being hands-on with these animals, you can tell by the body language of the female when she's in her window in the first place, and you don't have to force her into an early lock when she's not ready. You could wait 1 week and put a male in when she's more receptive. And again, you having a YouTube thing is great. I'll be honest, and I've said this a million times, the only reason I'm even doing this is because those 2 gentlemen are willing to do all the editing. Otherwise, I see no reason to do anything ever because there's just so much on my plate all the time. I couldn't even do it, nor do I have the ability to. But your job moving forward, and hopefully their job, and hopefully other people, is being informative, being honest, and explaining why this has potential. Everything is marketing. Justin is where he's at right now in ball pythons because of marketing. Justin is where he's at in reptiles as a whole because he's the most popular reptile breeder in the world. Even with people that don't work with ball pythons or like ball pythons still know who he is. And like I said, I have a few things that I believe in the near future with certain line breeding through things that we already have the potential of doing something unique. And even like Ben and Ryan over there that bought a dark northern from me, from a pair, Bam Bam and McGillicuddy, that I did 5 years in a row. And every year, just like you said, Frank, something unique would pop out every year. Maybe a super reduced pattern animal with only a couple bands or a few less bands than we're used to. Maybe it's that one dark animal. And again, seeing the potential in that, we've proven, and those guys have done that with an animal from me, that an animal that came from 0 dark lineage that just popped up has now created a dark lineage animal they get to move forward with. So again, it is a little frustrating because this is such an exciting species, and to take 10 steps forward in such a short period of time and now 11 steps back, it's just baffling. But that's, again, why I emphasize on, you need to be a fucking hero, buddy. You need to keep doing what you're doing, and you need to get a lot of people's eyes on it. We should not care about who's buying into these projects. Ball python markets don't crash. Ball python markets do very well. The only reason they start going down is from the amount of people working with them. But at the same time, again, the ball python market is the reptile industry. We revolve around ball python money. It's maybe that's a hard pill for some people to swallow, but certain things exist and certain things are there because of ball python money. And here's the reality, as I was rebuilding the skink collection, it wasn't skink money that was paying for the new skinks we were getting into. It was ball python money. It was boa constrictor money. It was corn snake money. I loved what this market did. It was a very exciting time, but there was also so many factors in a supply and demand market. You had Austin, you had me, you had Bill Brandt, you had fucking Benjamin, you had Ryan, you had Frank. You had a huge core group of people that saw this species being amazing, and we all fucking ran out. When a skink popped up on fauna, you had 15 seconds to buy that son of a bitch before one of those other 19 people did.
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead, bud. I'm done. I think I lost my voice on that one.
I think no, you're fine. And I don't disagree with what you're saying. Really, I think that kind of what you started off with is that where that market should be is because we keep on trying to sell to the breeder market, right? Because we're like, breeders got to breed these, and we don't want to produce too many because then we're going to be stuck with them. But we really, really need to develop the pet market for these. That's what Barcheck was starting to do, and people were like trying to buy them off of Craigslist and things like places, seeing them on Facebook and things like that, because that's where pets get bought. Like pet people don't know about morph market. Pet people don't know about some of the things, fauna, and the things that we know about. So we need to develop through YouTube, social media, websites, to get people to understand where to connect to breeders. I think that's the big thing. And then of course has to be a pet price.
And the pet price comment is the biggest thing here. And the reality is, and I've said this for a while, I find it tragic that I need to turn little kids away from my table to go buy a imported animal because suddenly the price of Northerns have gone so high for a very basic looking animal.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I still go way low on my price for kids, and I'm going to keep doing that because I didn't get into these because I thought it was a get rich scheme. But I do believe there is a value in the reds and the oranges and the yellows and the whites and the black projects, where those, of course, will always be that breeder market animal. But again, it's starting to look like that middle ground animal that is not quite to a 6 or 7 on level of quality. Maybe that's still a pet market animal, and maybe those $600 animals, $700 animals are going to be $350, $400 animals in a month or two when everyone's still sitting on them and suddenly people are dropping babies again. I do think that the price points on some of these have been a little unrealistic. And like I said, I do think that this market was influenced by 20 people all buying at the exact same time where there was nothing being produced. It's really hard to look at the economy side of something when it's a hobby or you're just doing something you're passionate about. But the moment you are 10 to 15 animals into a species, if you're not looking at stuff like that, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot later on.
I think that, so I'm with you on like a lot of what you said. I think what I think is going to happen is that your classic animal, which I freaking hate that word. I hate that descriptor. But like your typical colored animal, that's not a particularly line bred trait or something like. I think the price on those is too high and has been too high, and I think it's going to go down. I think it's okay that's going to go down a little bit, and I think so you can still make money on it. I think we need to do a better job, like you said, of marketing these line bred animals as something separate and as something for breeders and as investments. I do see. I think like the high color stuff, the high blacks, the high oranges, the reds, the yellows, the whites, I think all of that stuff can still stay up there pretty well. Not ball python well, but like, I don't, for like really rare stuff, like my blacks, $2,000, I don't think is any problem. I think for like really high quality whites, reds, oranges, like $1,000 is still not going to be a problem. But I do think like the $400, $450 for a typical classic baby, I think is, I don't know. I don't think that's going to be hanging around. I got the YouTube channel because I want information out there. I want people to, because I'm working with more uncommon species. I want their exposure to be out there. I've been obsessed with blue tongue skinks the majority of my life since I was a little kid. I think they're amazing. I think they're literally the best pet lizard that you can have. I think they blow everything else out of the water in terms of being a pet lizard. But then on the other hand, like they also have this potential as being an amazing breeding project. And I just, the problem is it's with leopard geckos, we don't have the mutations, right? We don't have the mutations. And with leopard geckos, you can get away with not, even though they still have mutations, you can get away with line bred stuff because you can turn over in a year. I think maybe the thing that's maybe scaring people away with thinking of these line bred traits as being like a true investment is I don't think people have the patience for it. because it's like, we're talking 2 years to get there. And then what if, then maybe the pairs don't hook up or whatever, the ones that you want them to. And, I think, I'm afraid that might be scaring people away a little bit in terms of like as being a breeding project. I don't know. I think that there's still tons and tons of potential there. But like you said, I really think that medium range animal is, in terms of price, is probably going to go away quite a bit. I think that there's like an amazing, huge, still possibly untapped market for like the pet quality animals that are perfectly healthy and, normal looking, and maybe not the ones that you and I want to hold back for breeding. But I still think that there's, you're still gonna, I think that there's still a good market for them at a lower price point than $450. And I do still think that there is a market out there for the really high end stuff. But I also think that people need to start realizing that you're not going to sell an orange line animal that doesn't look that orange for $800. You know what I mean? Like that's what people are trying to do. Like, this came from an orange line. All right, well, it looks pretty classic to me. Like, I'm not paying $600, $800 for that. Like, I have one just like it over here that came out of my normals. Or like it has a little bit of orange. That's nice, but like, is that worth $800? Is that worth $1,000? I'm not buying it, not anymore anyway. So I think that we need to just kind of shift our approach a little bit. I think we need to be okay with selling, maybe stuff that came out of oranges or reds or even blacks. If they don't have the high expression, they aren't worth as much. They just aren't, and that's okay. I don't know. I think the skink market is long term, right? This is not turnover. You can breed your males at a year old. I was doing that today, but you're not breeding females at a year old. And it's a long term game. It's not something that's I think is going to be a quick thing. And like you said, I think that there's going to be a big dip. I think that exactly what you said is going to happen. There's going to be a dip in the price. People are going to unload animals like crazy. We're going to have a hard time selling them for the prices that we want for a couple of years. But in 2-3 years, maybe less, maybe a little bit more, not less, but maybe more, then there's not going to be 150 animals on Morph Market in January. I think it's going down a little bit. I think it's going to crash. I think that a lot of people, like you said, are going to stop breeding as much or just stop breeding altogether. But then I still think there's a ton of potential there, and I'm not getting out of it. And I don't think it's a smart time to get out of it. I think it's a good time to be reflective about it.
No, we've even made references. Going out of business. I mean, if you invested in Borders books because you thought you were going to make money when they went down to 20 locations and they were going to be more efficient, that was a bad move. But the same with this species. Like you said, there will be that level out, and the thing is, man, when you produce a dark skink like that, there's no way that thing doesn't go viral every time. There's no way that anyone who works with any species doesn't get their eye on it, unless you're only posting in skink groups. You're limiting your demographic. But when that happens, when a fen makes an unbelievable red and someone else buys it and takes a picture for them, I love you, fen. I don't like your pictures. But when we start drawing attention, Mike Schultz is here with us now and helping out, and he is an amazing photographer. And we do have some very wonderful animals here, and I plan on doing a full photo shoot with them soon, just of unique color phases, starting at a light orange to a dark orange in pictures. Like, again, the reality is this is all marketing. This is showing people potential. And when people see potential in something, they're going to go for it. The fear of taking a little longer to get somewhere. I mean, the reality is, especially like in ball pythons right now, people are chasing triple, quad recessives. It could take you 6 breedings to even hit one. So I wouldn't bank on people being too impatient. And I do think it takes a special kind of person to be successful with line breeding a species. It's having an eye for something and seeing the potential. And again, that was one great thing about junior and senior at JMG is with the geckos they were working with, they saw potential in line breeding. They took it in different directions that people might not have. And I think that's amazing. And I love that this community grew as big as it did, as fast as it did, because the reality is there might not be a dark skink if there wasn't a Frank going on and buying from Diana. Like, it took a lot of people doing a lot of stuff right now to have unique stuff popping out of everyone's collection that we can then build on. I want to deconstruct certain things and reconstruct them and see what happens. Like, I think there is more breeding potential, line breeding in skinks than there are a lot of other species right now, because like you said, 2 generations and you've almost peaked on dark lineage animals. Like, I don't know how you can get better, bud. I hate to say it. Like,
I'll be honest. I'm telling you, I really think in another 2 years I'm going to produce an animal with a solid black body, with a solid black. Like, I have ones where the tail is black. It is black. I have like one animal with like the tiniest little bit of orange peeking through on the bars on the side. The head is pale white, black eye bands. But I really truly believe that in 2 years I'm going to produce an animal that looks melanistic except for the head.
Yeah, and again, that's the most exciting thing I've heard in skinks, because that's all I've wanted to see. Once I started seeing the development of Rebecca's stuff at Diana's place and just how far she went in a short period of time, and then you going from what she did and taking it to the next level. Anyone, and I don't want, this might sound rude, anyone could have got there, but
Sure.
again, with more cooks in the kitchen right now, you're going to start seeing more cool stuff coming out. So this industry expanding into a new customer base of breeders for the future and more people getting excited about it is only going to give us the chance to see animals that we wouldn't have thought to do ourselves. Everyone's going to look at something differently.
And now think about the fact that, like, I want to take my solid black animal and I have an animal that's solid orange. And I'm going to start crossing those. Now imagine what that animal looks like. Imagine an animal that is jet black with bright orange bars on it. Like, holy shit! Like, that's going to look amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it'll get there in a generation. I'm not saying I cross this and this and I'm going to have it on the first generation, but I think the potential is there. I think that we can start seeing stuff like that.
I agree. And, I do think there's, so, you know what? Fuck it. I don't even give a shit. Here's where I think my potential moving forward. And, I got loose lips. I can't keep secrets. I don't really give a shit. And again, going back to Justin with marketing, because I hate to say it, he is the best marketer in his species. He doesn't show you what he's doing until he's done it and he can sell you something. Because why advertise something and let people catch up to you? Me personally, and I've talked to a couple breeders, in my eyes, the biggest potential for future breeding to clean up every project, maybe minus the dark project, is injecting Turner white into it. Some of our most red, most yellow, and most orange. Exactly. You're eliminating pattern. You're eliminating dark pigment, and then you're overloading to a color. Even first generation, we've seen some really unbelievable stuff just from breeding reds to really wonderful Turner whites. And out of all the genes out there in play, Manny with his male, Miami Snow, I believe he calls it, and a female that we got from Ray Gerge probably about 4 years ago at Daytona. Probably a couple of the nicest Turner whites, in my opinion, in circulation right now. And I'd really love to be proven wrong. But, with those animals, what he's doing with his, I believe we can start cleaning them up a little bit and then injecting more color and creating more vibrant animals for the future. And I love what you're doing with sidebars on the black project, because we've been trying that with some of our red stuff. And I know there's other breeders that have done the same thing.
So I actually did something like that, where it's not as good as using like a Turner white or something, because I just didn't have that sort of animal. But I took, it's not a particular line skink, but it was like kind of a orangey, goldish colored animal without a lot of brown, didn't have much black in it. And then I paired it with my lightest female. I have this female that I call a silver. She's like, again, like just weird thing that popped up. That's this silver appearance, no black, just a very light, washed out animal. And I made this pairing between that female and this male that's kind of nice looking, but kind of rusty, but like not much black going on. And I've produced these gold animals that are there after one generation of just pairing it, because of having that kind of like gold that had a lot of brown in it, and then pairing it with this female that was very light and washed out. These babies are just, they're like yellow and orange right out of it, and it's not from any special lineage. These are not line bred. I just took a very pale animal and paired it with an animal that had some nice color that I wanted to see, and it produced these animals with very little pattern, almost no browns, no blacks, and just like gold. And I just posted, yeah, in the video that I just posted, I had the black one that was like all black, and then right after I had one of these gold ones, and that's from that pairing. And so like now, if somebody that has even better skinks than I do for like white stuff, like man, you're absolutely right. Like we could start. So now instead of having these orange animals that have still quite a bit of pattern, quite a bit of brown in there underneath that orange, now pairing that up with something that's washed out, that's white, that has no pattern. Like now you're ending up with an animal that is actually orange, that is actually red with little pattern in there. I mean, yeah. It's there.
A very nice yellow animal that we have from zero sunrise lineage, zero yellow lineage, came from one of Ray's Turner White to Turner White breedings. And I know he has put sunset and sunrise into it, and there could have been a little bit of that blood in there. But this thing's so fucking yellow, like, it's just fucking perfect, man. And, that's another thing, like, and I bring it up that the crested gecko market is a lot like our market. For a long time there, everybody wanted red crested geckos, and we paid $500-600 a piece for them. And then suddenly there were so many of them, we all went orange, and we started buying orange crested geckos. But then all of a sudden there was no red ones available anymore, and the price of reds went up after going way the fuck down again. So I do think with what we're doing in these guys, there will be a lot of that where certain colors, when overproduced, will of course go down in value because of supply and demand. But when people step away from them and stop working with them, the demand's going to go up again when they're non-existent. But yellow is another color that, in my opinion, still needs a lot of work, and it's really not non-existent. Scott has done some really great stuff with the sunrise stuff. Ray has done his fair share of great sunrise stuff over the years. But yellow is just one of those ones that it just doesn't seem to get attacked very hard. And yellow and darks are my two biggest focuses for the next 5 years, in my opinion. And we'll see what we do with them. And we'll see if we can progressively get better every year. And if we hit a wall, I guess we'll just move on or try to figure out a way to make them better. But outside of just using sunrise animals, I'd like to think there's yellows that are going to pop up from different lineages, and we can take it to our next level of a yellow line.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And that's the great thing about the Northerns is like you have stuff pop up. Like you'll out of a nothing normal classic lineage, you'll have a yellow pop out, you'll have a white one pop out, or a darker one than usual. And if you're selective in what you buy and what you breed, like you can make progress if you're thoughtful and you're selective, and you can even do it on a budget. I did. Right? I didn't buy Diana's most black animals, but like I was picky, and I was choosy and about which ones I bred, and like it can be done for sure.
Yeah, and again, short period of time with this breed. Well, I don't even think we have to talk about basic fish pair or anything like that. Ben and Ryan, you see the screen's frozen, and Ben's been smiling this whole time, and Ryan just looks like Ryan. I have no idea how you guys even reacted to this whole conversation. See, my thing still says we're at an hour and 30 minutes into the podcast.
It's
weird. I see Ben. I see him. Ben and Ryan both moving. I think Ben has his hand up there.
Yeah.
Oh, see, Ben, if you've had your hand up at all, bud, you're not moving to me. Like you're dead to me right now.
We've been trying to jump in. But you've been going steamboat there.
Sorry, guys.
And again, I apologize. We got the hand up rule, but right now it's been frozen since an hour and 39 minutes and 45 seconds. So anything that's happened since then, I wasn't trying to be rude.
Well, Ryan had something he wanted to jump into. I'll let him.
Have at it, buddy. Let's get all over the place with this thing. It better not be about fucking basic care, though.
Ryan's muted and he won't unmute.
Oh, is that why nothing's happening?
Ben is being a mute Nazi over there, acting like he gets to decide who gets to talk when.
You know what? He does that to me a lot too, but I don't complain about it.
Well, when I was getting a good echo, so I kept on changing around the mutes to try to.
As long as you feel better, Ben, that's all that matters. So
yeah.
So I was just trying to interject, like 25 minutes ago, that we were talking about how the market's getting soft, and I think that the market has gotten soft because the gatekeepers have sort of made it go that way. The market started out with, and I'm not talking about back in the day when it was like you couldn't sell a skink for $25, like 20 years ago you were talking about, but like the recent market, it started out with people coming in, and everybody was an investor. It was all breeders It was all high end. It was all super rare. And that was cool because the animals really weren't there. Like that was sustainable. But then everybody who could come in at that level kind of did. So like, and they started breeding their own, and then their stock got higher end and more higher end, and now they're not looking for classics anymore. Those people are doing 1 or 2 purchases a year on the high end, and we haven't done enough to expand the pet market because you're going to get, most of your people are going to want to be pet guys, and then you're going to get a percentage of those that also are going to want to develop into breeders, and that will sustain that breeder end market. But you can't just have this echo chamber of we're all high end, we're all doing this top notch stuff, and then try to sell your beginner animals because nobody needs those anymore. So as long as we keep going out and being evangelists for how awesome these animals are, not from a breeder perspective, but just a cool, awesome, easy to take care of reptile that you can have, and you can develop that passion from day one, and then develop into, well, I've been doing this for 3 years now, and I got a male or I got a female, and I want to get a pair because I want to do my first babies. And a neat one popped out, and I sold a little bit of my babies. Now I want to develop what I'm doing a little more. Let me buy into a little higher end stuff. But we stopped doing that because, I don't know, it's controversial to talk about why it happened, but Dave doesn't care about talking about it. He's loose lips Dave. But there's just like these groups try to control what's going on, and if you're a new person that comes in, do anything even slightly wrong, you get bashed. You know what I mean? And that scares those people off because it's not fun anymore when everybody's jumping down your throat when you're trying to be part of the crew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm not really a part of a lot I'm in the skink groups, but I don't really like other than posting my animals, like I don't even know what you're talking about, honestly, because like I don't know like the ins and outs of who's saying what. Like I'm not connected to any of that, honestly. Like I really don't talk to a lot of people. Like I talk to Diana about skinks all the time, and that was it. I didn't really talk to anyone about skinks. But I think you're absolutely right, though. I think that the real potential, like I think there's two kind of prongs in what this can be. There's the high end push these colors forward and do that, but then there also needs to be the other prong that is the pet market, where you're only concerned about a healthy animal that's going to be a great pet. And for me, like they are literally like the best pet lizard. Like they're so awesome. They're so easy. They're so bulletproof. Like everybody keeps them differently. And the reason why you can do that is because the animal is so amazingly adaptable. Like you can feed them 100 different foods and they're going to be healthy. You can keep them with UV. You can keep them without UV. You can keep them in a tub. You can keep them in a bioactive enclosure. Like you can keep them outside in the right weather. Like like Ron's keeping them outside in Florida all year round. Like you can keep them 100 ways and they're all going to look great. And, like as long as you're giving them what they need.
Listen, like I was trying to say, and I'm glad Dave got my takeaway here, that skinks are great, and we need to grow the community and grow the pet market, and it's great. They're great animals. That's what I said.
Yeah, I just added a little more. I added a little bit of sugar to that, buddy. A little bit of spice. Got a little spicy for you.
I taste it. It's very spicy.
But again, and Frank, and this is another thing that bugs me. All the horror stories about breeding skinks, arms getting ripped off, tails getting ripped off. We consecutively for the past 2-3 years have bred anywhere from 80 to 100 females, and before that we were breeding 50, and then I was breeding 20 females. I've never lost a limb. We've never lost a tail. We've never had a jaw get bit off. No. I've had to stick my finger inside skink's mouth just to try to pry it open and then take a fucking chomp on for about a minute or two. It is a very hands-on species when it comes to breeding, and it is a very paying attention to your animals. It's knowing what it's like when your female's in her window. It's knowing how to properly cycle. There is a little more involved, but honestly, out of all the species I've worked with over the years, I feel like it's been the easiest one I've ever worked with. Just because when it comes to time for breeding, how much time really goes into it. Again, you can waste a lot of time putting 2 skinks together that aren't ready to breed and stare at them for 30 minutes and hope they're going to suddenly care. Or you be smart enough to move on to the next pair you're working with and just wait for them to be in their window. But these horror stories about tails getting ripped off, mistakes can happen. But, you know, if you're going to spend more time on your phone trying to get that perfect picture of your animals that are about to lock compared to paying attention to your animals and their well-being, you're never going to be a good skink breeder, and you're going to keep running into problems. Yes, skink breeding can be a little more involved when it comes to the lock portion of it. And yeah, we can't raise these things up together, but easy diets, very easy to maintain, great growth rate, great size. The thing is we keep on saying how we need to promote and talk how great they are. The easiest thing to do is to talk about how fucking awesome these guys are. They are the easiest species to work with lizard-wise in my eyes.
They are. They're the easiest. That's why I say, like, they're like the best pet that there is. Like, you can, any way that you want to keep them, you can pretty much do it. And I agree. Like, the whole breeding thing, like, I've had multiple people that buy from me that are thinking about breeding ask me, like, is the breeding really that bad? And I'm like, no. Like, look at a leopard gecko. Like, the male bites the female and, you know, does his thing. Like, he bites then too. Like, you'll see little scuff marks. Like, half the time, you know, how do I know that gecko made it? Because she has scuff marks all up and down her back. You know, just like with a blue tongue. Like, again, same thing. Like, I haven't done the big numbers of breeding. You know, like, I only bred like 10 females last season, but I've been doing it a long time, and I've never had a major injury. Never. Never. It's not as, and like, has that happened like a few times? Sure, it has, but it's not that bad. It really isn't. And I need to be doing more, you know, video recording. I need to do more skink stuff this season. You know, I'm going to do skink stuff this season on YouTube, and just like walking people through stuff, you know, and I've been able to, I guess, like, steer clear of it a little bit. Like, I see the people that attack over tubs and attack over UV and stuff like that, and I do my best to stay, you know, above it and away from it as much as possible. But like, I'm gonna be sharing a lot, and it is like, there is like that little bit of fear and hesitation, because you know how people are, and like you said, quite frankly, people with 2 animals, 4 animals, you know, maybe 10 animals that have been doing it for 2, 3, 5 years. Attacking you over not using UV or using a certain type of enclosure or using a certain type of food. So I do have a little bit of like fear and hesitation there, but at the same time, and hopefully at this point, like, I can, you know, it's just present it in the way that they are, and like, the way that I do it, the way that I present everything in terms of care and breeding is like, this is how I do it. I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm not saying it's the best way. This is what I do. It works for me. I've done this before. I've done that before. This is what I settled on. I'm continuing to progress. This is what I do. And so far, that's generally well received. And I think that it's like with anything, you know, your average person, that most people are going to see that and understand that and take away the positives from that. And you're going to have a vocal minority that are going to take the negative away from that and are going to try and tear down instead of build up. And, you know, I really think that we just need to ignore that as much as possible and just put out as much good content as we can. And just, we have 4 people here right now that think that these things are friggin' awesome. Like, blue tongue skinks, northerns, easterns are just awesome animals. They're easy. I had my first blue tongue. I got him when I was 12. He died like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. You know, like, I'm pushing 40. Like, he was like one of my best friends. Like, they're like, I love that animal. I love my skinks. Like, this is an animal that's going to take you through decades of your life, and you can feed it. And it's the easiest thing. It's easier than a crested gecko to feed. Go to the grocery store, get dog food and cat food. And, you know, anyone that talks bad about that, like, dog food and cat food has more research and money put into it for an omnivore, for a carnivore, than any other diet that you can think of. People get problems. I'm going to give my skink a natural diet. I'm going to give him meat and veggies and fruit. And guess what? The thing ends up with MBD, or it ends up with vitamin deficiencies, because those things aren't balanced, because those things haven't been tested for decades. You know, not even by skink people, by dog people. That's where the money is in the pet industry, dog and cat. Like, it's good food if you're careful about the type of food that you buy, but that stuff has been formulated over gosh knows how long to be perfect, to be well balanced for omnivores or for carnivores with cat food. And it's just so simple. It's I guess people try to make it overcomplicated, you know, putting in a little bit too, like, anthropomorphizing with it a little bit. Like, they aren't people, they aren't dogs, they aren't cats. You know, I try and keep it as simple as possible. I think, you know, I try to progress. I try to make things better. But at the end of the day, I think that we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot by overcomplicating, by thinking too much. And, you know, I'm guilty of that sometimes. And I don't know. I hope that we can, as a community, move forward and just get more people out there to realize two things. One, this is an amazing pet lizard, maybe the best pet lizard. And two, that there's huge breeding potential there for somebody that is interested in line breeding, that is interested in beautiful colors, that is working with a project that will pay you, that will put out the money year after year after year. You know, I think both those things are there, and I think that that's what makes for real potential. And I think it's exciting. I think that's why that's why I wanted to come on here. That's why I listened to to a lot of the episodes that you guys do, because half the time it ends on skinks, and that's why I would watch. And even if it was a snake guy, talking about skinks a little bit here and there, and I think there's a lot there, and I think that I have a pretty decent eye for this sort of thing, and I think that we're not done yet. I don't think it's going to get too bad. I think we're going to have to adjust a little bit, and
yeah. Brian and I talked about definitely doing maybe reducing the price on some of the more typical looking animals that we produce, but I do think that I think that once the pet market picks up, then the price can steady out at a good spot. I think that it can. So I think that there's a good potential for that market to be still steady and strong. I mean, if you can sell out every year and do okay, if we can get the pet market at the right price point, I think it's a very viable and good, strong market. I think it's just taken a slight dip from where it's been, just because of how, we didn't sell our Easterns in 6 minutes this year. We sold them in 3 months. We did produce a lot, but it took a little while. And Dave has told us 100 times, plan on an animal sitting in the tubs for a year. You don't have to worry about replacing or refilling that tub for a year. So if you can sell the animal in under a year, you shouldn't be doing too bad.
But like ball pythons or snakes, that's the great thing about blue tongues. That it's not going to hurt you to have that animal in a tub for 6 months or for a year.
Right.
That's okay. I'm not keeping a chameleon for a year because I have to have a naturalistic enclosure with UV light, and the things live for 3 years. I'm not keeping a chameleon for a year. That doesn't make sense. I'm dumping it. I'm getting, it's going to go one way or the other. With a blue tongue, it doesn't hurt anyone. It eats dog food. Once it's past its baby phase, it's dog food or cat food once a week. It's not hurting you. It's not costing you anything. So
right.
That's the great thing about them, is it's okay. And like you said, Justin being the master marketer for ball pythons, everybody wants to get out of the gate first and sell. And guess what he does? He sits back and he waits. He lets everybody else do that and does the slow and steady approach, and always being there and pushing forward. And you can do that with ball pythons, and you can do that with skinks. It's okay to sit on them a little bit.
Yeah. So kind of going in a little different direction. So I want to, if you can still talk about the strength of the market, but like I said, the strength's only as strong as people in it and what they're doing proactively. But talking a little more about the care, because I know I said no basic bitch stuff, but the thing is with skinks is we all watch the Australians doing them in rack systems, and they did them for years that way. And even people like Joe Ball now will say the benefit of UVUB on them. And
yep.
A lot of us are trying to look into options. I know there are some with, there's LED options now that can be added to rack systems if you choose, if you're still going to continue with rack systems. We have the closest thing to a rack in a cage. We have a rack system with a nice big window on the front. The height of it doesn't really matter. They're not utilizing it. These guys aren't climbers. But it's a lot of floor space with a nice window on the front. It's a rack cage, let's put it. And I've always really liked them. But I have looked at cage options for the future just because them benefiting from lighting. We didn't use lighting because we were told we didn't have to. The same reason why we were told to always use screen cages with chameleons. It took somebody to crack the code and put the time in. Even dietary stuff. I was told to buy hornworms. I was told to buy all these different beetles. I was told you had to pretty much change the insects every single week. And now I'm being told I was wrong. But in 2002, there were a lot of people that agreed with screen cages and these diverse diets. So again, more people working with a species and just spending the time understanding it, we might realize the huge importance of UV on them. I'm not sure the importance of the basking spot because I still believe that under tank heaters will be enough for that. But we are always proactively trying to find the right LED to add to it with UV on it. And hopefully the one that, oh, what's his name in Tennessee? Our Bronia guy, Jason Wagner recommended. And I know you guys sent me the link 10 times and I've yet to buy one, but I want to start playing around with that a little bit more. We've even talked about buying cages and trying a breeding cycling this year where we do all the males in cages, create that nice hot spot like the Australians do, introducing the females to the male cages. And then because of candling our females and knowing which ones are gravid and which ones aren't, moving them into those cages and those males out. So their entire time through gestation, they can have UV, have that hot spot, have that different environment that hopefully will make stronger babies. Now it's adding a lot of extra steps, but if it works, why not do it?
We put all of ours on UVB last year or the year before, I guess, or so. We made a rack system that supports UVB, but we did buy that LED bulb that Jason Wagner talked about. But the bulb itself is pretty big.
Does it produce UV?
Yes.
He says it does.
The LED?
It does. We bought one. We don't have a UV meter. But
you have a UV. Send me the link because I have a UV meter and I'd be interested in playing around. Because I do have a UV meter for my chameleons and geckos and that. It's a big bulb. Yeah. I mean, then just use a CFL. Just use like a Zoom Ed CFL then, right? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. And again, you know, a lot of people argue the technology is just not there for the LEDs for that yet. I'm sure it'll get developed a little bit better, and maybe in 3 years we'll have a better option. But yeah, like I said, the really cool thing about all the people doing this right now is, again, just like, again, all the misinformation on chameleons, you know, every year I'd like to think we're all going to try to proactively find a way to be better at this. And we're not just going to settle with the norm. And that goes for all species. And the way every species is worked with today is completely different than 2000. Go by the VPI original video about ball python breeding and look at their huge vision cages with a single female ball python in it. Like, we are modifying what we're doing to figure out what's best for these animals. And of course, with ball pythons, a lot of people have found a smaller environment is better for them because you get a stronger feeding animal. But then people look at it and say, well, why are you doing it that way? And, you know, we're not doing that so we could jam 10 times more animals in a small space. We've learned that they do better that way. When a ball python's not eating, what do? You take it out of its enclosure and you put it in the smallest possible enclosure it can live in. And then 3 days later, you open the drawer and the thing shoots out trying to bite you because it's hungry all of a sudden. Like, you know, again, one great thing about this and, you know, trying to figure out better ways of doing it. Like Frank said, what works for you might not work for somebody else. And that's very true. Regionally is going to make big differences. Unfortunately for me, I'm a man on the move. I'm a goddamn gypsy over here. I bred them in Buffalo. I bred them in Charlotte, North Carolina 2 different times in 2 different livings there. I bred them in Cleveland, Ohio 1 season. I bred them in Northern Missouri. I bred them in Southern Missouri now. We've done a lot of different regions and we've continued to do it the same way. And we have been fairly successful, but I don't know about you, Frank, the bigger we get, the lower percentage of females tend to go every year. And we also find that some males are a little more reluctant to breed. And we have had the discussion of maybe pheromones having something to do with that, weaker, less dominant males, just not being very proactive with breeding in areas where you have more dominant males. You know, like I said, we found with certain males that if you don't introduce the female to their cage, they are not going to breed and they'll never consider it. You know, certain animals need a little something special, but, you know, we've had a couple males that are really important males to the collection that are only 6, 7 years old that haven't bred in 2 or 3 years. And it's killing me. It's projects that I want to do something with. I want to get better with, and I can't get these darn males to show any interest. So we've discussed taking those males completely out of that environment and putting them in a different room and seeing if that changes their demeanor. You know, no one's ever really done this in a very, very large scale. I think to date, Ray Gerge has probably had the single most greatest season of breeding. And a lot of times I wonder if that has a lot to do with him just having old lineage that hasn't been so overly inbred over the last 5 or 6 years. Because the nicer these things get, I find the harder it is to get them to breed sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I have not been breeding numbers of them long enough to really say. Like, what I do know is that blue tongues are they can be touchy breeders. Like, they're just, sometimes you have to try 6 different things to get a pair to lock up, to get them to go. Like, I'll have, like, I'm going through it right now. You know, like it's this. You know, I'm starting to pair up. Started last week, going into this week. I'll put a female in with a male. Male will flip out, attack the female. Put a male in with the female. Female flips out, attacks the male. Put them in a neutral location. Lock. Everybody's calm, nice, calm breeding. You know, and then there's windows big time. Like the males, you know, I'll have males where as soon as they wake up, they're like, let's go. I want females now. And then I have others where it takes them 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I have others there, they want that once that first shed is done, shed the sperm plugs or whatever, you know, boom, they go. You know, they're not. So it could be 2 things. It could be that we just haven't really figured it out yet. That there's stuff going on that we don't know about, like, for instance, pheromones or whatever else. Or they're just not as cookie cutter as certain things. You know, like, how, you know, maybe it is UV. Maybe maybe UV does make a difference. Maybe having a halogen bulb, you know, does make a difference. But then how can you account for the animals that have been living in racks forever that are breeding year in and year out? So, like, I just don't know. I think about the UV stuff all the time. Like, I have all my adults are kept in cages, in PVC enclosures. They're not kept in racks. I don't have any adults in racks anymore. I raise the babies in racks, of course, mostly just because I want to see my animals. Is mostly, and every single one of them is lit, very bright LED lighting in them. Doesn't produce any UV, but it's bright light. Just mostly because I want to see them. But I do think all the time about, like, doing experiments with UV, doing experiments with, you know, the halogen bulbs. I've kept these animals every way. I've kept these animals in naturalistic enclosures with UV, with overhead basking, with, you know, heat mats, with heat tape, with heat cord, you know, like everything. Like, I've tried it all, and I haven't, I'm not big enough of a breeder to say what it matters in terms of breeding, but, like, I don't see a huge difference in terms of care, in terms of the quality of life of the animal. I'm not seeing the difference. And, you know, for somebody that's been doing it continuously for 25 years, I think that means a little bit, at least, saying that, like, I've done all this stuff that's, like, I don't know, like, they're talking, like, with UV and with halogen bulbs, like, you know, I did that 20 years ago, and I didn't see those animals being more healthy than the animals that I have behind me right now without UV and with heat tape underneath. And then, like, I see animals like Ray Gurry's animals or Joe Ball's animals or anybody else where they're kept in a rack, and I see those animals, I'm like, my God, that's a gorgeous, perfect, healthy animal. Like, how can you say that? Like, how can and then you guys aren't saying it, but how can people say that, you know, pull out this skink out of a rack system that is flawless, that is amazing looking, and say that it needs UV light to be healthy? Like, look at the animal, it's healthy. Like, yeah. And again, I'm not saying there's no benefit to it. I'm not saying that. Maybe there is benefit to it for all of them. And the thing that's really kind of irking me a little bit recently with all this is people saying that it's needed for health, for thriving, for vigor. And that is factually incorrect. It's not. Maybe it will make a difference in terms of in breeding. But, like, I don't know. Like, I think about it all the time, like, you know, about, like, adding UV, about changing the setups and everything else. So I think it's worth thinking about. But that's one of my biggest pet peeves with blue tongues right now is having people that have been keeping blue tongues for 5 years, you know, tell me the right way to keep them. And I've been doing it for so long, and I don't know the right way to keep them.
There's a lot of influences on people's opinions on that, kind of like the bioactive trend that's been getting really big recently, and how, you know, just the overall cage discussions. I think there was like a panel of breeders or YouTube stars that were going to have some big discussion about why we should be keeping things in bigger cages. Again, for each their own. But like you said, Frank, we've done it a lot of ways. And, there's always two sides to this because there's a reality in this too. With breeding anything, people typically will find the bare minimal that they have to put into it to be successful with it. So this wasn't us cutting corners or we're like, oh, we figured out we could do them in a rack and they're fine. It was the norm, and we had healthy animals, and we never knew there was anything wrong with it. And still to this day, we don't believe there's anything wrong with it. But you can't please everybody. And honestly, getting hung up on those little things, it's not even worth it anymore, because at the end of the day, with any business, when you're working with a live animal, your animals do all the speaking for you. If your phone's ringing all day from customers complaining, you're doing something wrong and you might reassess your business. But when you're putting animals out there in new homes and you're not getting blown up and you're seeing updated pictures on Facebook of them doing well, you're doing your job by producing a healthy animal and selling it to somebody and give them a fighting chance to be successful with it also. So regardless how you get there, and again, I'm not supporting jamming these things in like a B18 because they can live in there as long as they can drink their water.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that, we've tried different things over the years, and, we have learned with this species that we will produce animals in these rack systems. They live in there and thrive. We produce babies that are healthy. They grow up with no kinking. And I'm not going to pretend like kinking's not a thing in the industry, but, it's out there. I'm sure a lot of it's dietary stuff, because the reality is, we didn't see it before, and some could be lineage stuff. One big discussion that the Ractodactylus community has with the skink community is underbites right now.
Yeah.
That shit's so fucking frowned in that industry, it's not even funny. And in our industry, it hasn't really been acknowledged yet. We don't know if that's something that, from too much inbreeding we got there. It's really, I don't think it's ever even really truly been a public discussion within the skink community, but other communities have looked in and wondered why we're doing this. So like I said, there's a lot of things, when it comes to the care of these, I'm all about improving their life. I'm all about trying to find better ways. Those ARS racks we bought were not cheap. Every time I think we buy one of those, it's $2,700, and we're only housing 18 animals. But honestly, I want to buy 10 more of them as soon as I can. Like, I think it is the best rack that we've ever used for skinks. Before that, I made all my own racks from a very large IKEA tub that was very clear, because even the demeanor of certain animals are a collection that were always just uppity and mean for no reason. When we switched them to the ARS rack systems, they were so much calmer. When you open the cage, they weren't surprised to see you. When you're in there working, you see them all with their cheeks pressed up against against the glass, staring at you as you're mixing their food or just kind of in there working. This isn't a very inquisitive animal, and this is an animal that likes to see what's going on around it and pays attention. We all know those little guys will follow you around when you're moving around the room.
Absolutely. I agree. And I love this blue tongue skink conversation. I did want to, I know that we're at 2 hours and 42 minutes. Probably doesn't.
That's all right. We can make this a 2-part episode. We'll do a chameleon episode and we'll do a skink episode.
I did have one more question, and then maybe we can start wrapping things up. I just wanted to hear, and I kind of prepped you a little bit on this. I did want to hear some cool AZA stories that you want to talk about. I think that would be fun, and I think people would want to hear it. And we can, if there's other questions, we can always get back to the skinks, because we could talk skinks all night, really. And
Can I ask one thing, though? Can I ask one more skink question and an opinion from Frank that we've also talked about, and then I'd love to hear these stories?
Yeah.
So to wrap up skinks, so I've brought it up in the past. We are working with Warren Booth to set up a program this year where you can send your skinks shed in, and they can ID the sex, similar to what they do in parrots and other bird species. The thing they developed for green tree pythons. Now, 2 parts to this, and if this is a question, even though it sounds like me talking, I don't believe we'll ever do our pet level animals with this. But now when we talk about investment level animals, the reds, the high oranges, your blacks, now I believe that the market will be strengthened if you can then spend that little bit of money to get it sexed and actually have a baby labeled for what sex it is, because we all know everybody always wants to know what their sex of their skink is. And we don't have any way to say it. I've heard of candling techniques that I don't think are necessarily completely proven yet. There's people that pop, but sometimes you get a big hemiclitoris and you don't even know what you're talking about. Benjamin and Ryan, first example of that. Picked up an animal that was popped as a male and it proved out to be female, and I've done the same in the past. So do you think it'll strengthen or help us out if we can actually sex our high end? Do you think that'll draw more buyers in that have more confidence in what they're getting in compared to a 50-50 chance of having something they can work with in the future?
Yeah, I mean, if the cost is reasonable, so like from what I understand, like I've heard a little bit about this from Green Tree Python guys, is like it's not just the shed of the animal, but don't you need like from the parents and like the grandparents or something like that?
So to create the test, what we did is we went back, I think, 2 or 3 generations,
Yeah.
and it took sheds from great great grandma, grandmother, mom, and dad, right to baby. So they can create a test through that. Now there might still be more that needs to be added to it, but as far as I've been made aware, that once all that's there, the test can be in place and they can move forward. And this was actually something that Barcheck was starting to develop years ago. So essentially, it's just kind of picking up where they left off.
Well, I mean, if it's something that can be done and it's not going to cost hundreds of dollars, then I think it's a great idea, and I think it would definitely help. I think it would help if it were a thing that were if you could do a batch of them that wasn't too terribly expensive, and you could do a litter and figure it out. Like that would help the pet market or the small time breeder just as much as the high end guys, but especially the high end guys. Like if you're paying $1,000 or $2,000 for an animal, you want to know what sex it is, right? So like if it's something that can be done relatively easily and without breaking the bank, then I think it would definitely help. Because yeah, if you're if you're in it as an investment and you're looking for a thing, I have this beautiful black female and I want something that's at least semi unrelated that's black, but I need a male. I don't need another female. You know, like yeah, if you could guarantee that for a younger animal, something that's not 3 years old and proven, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, we'll figure out price point soon. To tell you the truth, once the ball's rolling on this, this is not anything that we profit from in any way. And once they get the test in place and there's a little more details about it, I'll let them run however they decide to do it. It might be something just through a lab. This is something that we'll market on our website and give, our customers opportunities. But, again, the reality is, if we produce 200 animals, you're not going to get 200 done every year. It doesn't make any sense. But again, for the investment level animals, I just think there's a big benefit for everybody in this to go out of their way to sex out their animals so they can actually label them properly. And I'm sure not everyone's going to jump on board with this, but, and when it comes to the pet person, if they can't wait 6 months to a year to identify their animal, they can do the same thing from home, send their shed in.
Yeah. All
Tim,
right,
some
so
fucking stories. This is very important to him. He's not going to fall asleep at all tonight unless we
shit.
tell him a story.
Well, all right. Well, I'm definitely gonna disappoint you then because they're not like that amazing or anything. But I can tell you a little bit about like my history as a zookeeper, a little about like some of the stuff I did because the zoo that I worked for is very unique. So Clyde Peeling's Reptiland is one of the best AZA reptile facilities in the country. They were 45 minutes from where I lived up in northern Pennsylvania. The amazing thing that they do is they have a whole separate wing. And because this is a private zoo and it's not like a state run thing, they run it as their own business. So they have a separate thing called Peeling Productions where they manufacture their own zoo exhibits, sell them to other zoos, to museums, do like piecemeal work. But the really cool stuff that they do is we created multiple exhibitions of live animals. A straight reptiles one that was just lizards and snakes, one that was just geckos, one that was just crocodilians. And we created these with all like huge naturalistic zoo enclosures, better than, not to piss anyone off, better than 90% of zoos out there in terms of what they look like. Amazing looking things. We designed the graphics and everything. A zoo exhibit that was turnkey, that could be boxed up into the big like crates like they use in like the music industry for concerts and stuff like that, and can be driven on tractor trailers we would go all over. American Museum of Natural History in Manhattan, they would get stuff from us all the time. Out to California, Reading Museum, Chicago at the Shedd Aquarium, the Baltimore Aquarium rented our stuff. Somewhere in Florida, Miami Zoo got stuff from us, Fort Lauderdale, the Science Museum. So we had these exhibits and then not only did we build them and create them and have the graphics and everything, but we supplied the animals and the zookeeper. And they would rent these things out for 6 months at a time. And all the animals were provided, and somebody like me was provided, and I would go and live in Chicago and Manhattan and Fort Lauderdale and Redding, California for 2-3 months, work in this zoo exhibit. I would rotate back out, live at home for 2-3 months. Somebody else would be there at that time. And then so literally for years, and every summer, in college, I was living in a major city of the United States, taking care of an amazing zoo collection and of lizards and snakes, whatever. Geckos and lizards and snakes were the 2 exhibits that I helped to design and find the right animals for. And it was just amazing. So imagine being in your 20s and just spending 6 months living in different cities around the country, taking care of reptiles 7 days a week. So I would go in and I would take care of all the animals before the museum or the zoo opened. So I would go in and work for like 3 hours from like 5 to 8 or from 6 to 9 or whatever. And then I would be done for the day until the museum closed. I would do a few other things, maybe behind the scenes or whatever. But then I would be done. I had to do that 7 days a week, but I was in effect working like 3-4 hours a day. It was like amazing. Then like living in Manhattan with an apartment paid for and my food paid for, living in Chicago and so forth. And we did, because these were like big events, like museums and zoos shelled out big money for these special exhibitions. So they'd publicize the hell out of them. So half my day I'd be on television. Like I'd go do local news stuff. Younger kids won't even know, but like David Letterman show, like I've been on the David Letterman show with animals in Manhattan. Like you got to do all that stuff, and it was just like pretty much amazing. Like it was like the most amazing thing I could do in my 20s in college. Working with Komodos, working with crocodiles, working with venomous. After so many years, I became a senior keeper there, and I've trained a dozen people on how to work with venomous, on how to work with large crocodilians. And it's just like this experience that I had where I was making 25 grand a year, but my rent was paid for. I'd get a stipend for food, and it was like just like an unbelievable experience. And it was just like, so just imagine, being a traveling zookeeper, of some of the coolest reptiles and coolest exhibits you can imagine, and then like moving from city to city to city and like meeting all the new people there and getting to experience a new city. And by the end, I was like writing training manuals and, like I said, training people with venomous and training people on our protocols. So by the end, I would train someone for a couple of weeks and they would go out and do their thing on that exhibit for months at a time by themselves. And they still do it, and I do miss part of it, but I'm settled down. I had a number of animals back then, but I would take like the 10 or 12 small animals I had with me on the road, or I'd leave them at the zoo or whatever. But like I'd not breeding big collections of animals at the time, and not making a living, not supporting a family and all that stuff. So I didn't do it long term, but man, it was awesome. Just all the different places I got to go and all the animals to work with. It was a dream.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, a lot of there's definitely some stories I could tell like from there, but like little sketchy stuff that maybe like in terms of like venomous and whatnot that it may be best not to do. But there's definitely always some fun stuff. Huh? No, I don't want to throw them under the bus too much, but like in terms of like I don't want to like here's the thing, like if we had it was a pretty loose atmosphere, so we'd have fun a lot. So like for instance, this isn't like we would mess with each other. Like I'd have my head in an enclosure and I'd have a cobra in a locked container. Then somebody would come up and like shove a snake stick up my butt or something like that while I was doing it and bash my head because thinking that, or like I'd be in the alligator pit and somebody would go by and make the make the alligator mom noise, and then all of a sudden mom is charging me and stuff like that. Just oh, here's a couple other good ones. We would transport animals. We'd have to go. One time we went and got a huge Aldabra tortoise from Jacksonville Zoo, and so this is in the middle of winter. It's right around Christmas time. We take like this company van, drive it down there. and we had like this big crate that the thing gets in, and we were able to stop on the way down. But then zoo staff were, we have this tortoise, which is like 400 or 500 pounds. This is a full-grown Aldabra tortoise. Get it in there, and it's not too bad in Florida. It's like 50 degrees, 60 degrees, but up north it's freezing. So we get the thing in, and so it's a 14-hour drive, and we can't stop. And so we're going, and this thing was in the, it was in the crate in a van, and it was just a minivan, and it was secured, and it had like a lid over it and everything, and it had like the straps down, but it would push itself up, this 500-pound animal, and up against the thing, and then its feet would slide out and then come down, and the van would just go scooting across the thing. And like it's in the middle of winter, so we can't stop, and we're just made the drive as fast as we can. And that was quite the experience. We made that drive pretty quick, but we did a lot of stuff like that, just being able to go around to different zoos and taking animals. Komodos, we got a couple of those in. Just being able to work with Komodos was pretty great. Definitely selling it short right now, mostly just because I've been talking for 3 hours, so it's like just dead at this point, I think. So I probably forgetting a lot of like the fun anecdotal stuff, and I also just don't want to throw people under the bus too much with certain things.
We understand that, but hey, to be fair, Dave talked for at least a third of it, so
yeah,
that's a good point.
Dick move like always, buddy. I always apologize for it, but apparently I don't mean it when I do.
But no, that's cool. That sounds like a really fun experience. It's almost like a traveling circus, like lots of crazy things. Yeah. But yeah, with the zoo
it was a lot like a professional traveling circus. It's exactly what it was. It was great.
Awesome. That's so cool. But yeah, I mean, we had a good time. We really appreciate you being on. I mean,
of course, yeah. I was really happy. I told Dave I wanted to come on, just to be able to put myself in the conversation, because I love hearing you guys talk about it. I love hearing about it from a business perspective, and obviously we can talk about blue tongues all day, and reptiles are my favorite subject. So happy to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So thank you so much. We're gonna link your website, your YouTube, and Instagram, and all that stuff in this description. So anybody that's listening, make sure you check that out. Ryan brought us in, so I'm going to bring us out. Dave, did you have any more last words of wisdom for everybody?
Really just I'm really glad you had a butt stuff story, because I'm a big fan of those. And honestly, keep doing what you're doing, bud, because like I said, I'm one of your biggest fans. I've been drooling over you for a couple years, and I like your animals too.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be after all the COVID stuff, we'll definitely be coming to visit. Seriously, we're like not even 2 hours apart. Right? So that's pretty dope.
Yeah, absolutely. Once all this, things are better, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, Ryan's trying to talk, but he doesn't realize he muted himself, so he has to unmute himself. I can't unmute him.
I said hashtag buy miniature reptiles.
Buy miniature reptiles.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I know.
That's a good one, right? I like that. All right. So thank you guys so much for watching and listening. If you're listening, you should probably check out the YouTube channel just to see some of the pictures that we put up there, because Frank's stuff is amazing looking, super bright colors for chameleons, and the geckos are just the electric blue stuff. It's unbelievable. So make sure you guys are supporting US ARC, and thank you guys so much for listening. It's been great. So Frank Payne with Living Art by Frank Payne. You guys have to check out all of his links.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, Frank Payne in there.
Thanks.
I
know a little bit.
That's fine.
And we didn't even talk about smog.
I know, smog giganticus.
Shut up. Let the man go to sleep. He's dying here.
Yeah. Well, it's getting late, so thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
All right. See ya.